Hey guys, tonight we begin with the strange little Viking habits that somehow wandered into the modern world and refused to leave. You know the ones, the quiet traditions that sit in the background of your life like confused tourists from the year 800 who still think longboats are parked outside. These rules once made sense in a world of frost, feuds, and questionable bathing routines, but now they linger like stubborn relatives at a feast you did not invite, and you, somehow, are still following them. So before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And be sure to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now, get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You step into a world where the cold does not bite, so much as it negotiates with your soul. The air feels thick, heavy with the kind of chill that makes your eyelashes stiffen and your breath rise in lazy white clouds. You are not used to this kind of silence. It is a wide, icy quiet that stretches across fjords and forests, the sort of quiet that makes you instinctively check over your shoulder even when nothing moves. The snow beneath your boots crunches like old bones, and every sound you make seems louder than it has any right to be. Even your heartbeat feels intrusive here. This is Viking country, and it greets you without ceremony. You. Notice that the houses are not really houses, but wooden fortresses pretending to be cozy. Smoke curls from their roofs in thin streams, carrying the smell of burning pine and something meaty that may or may not be edible. The village sits on a patch of earth that looks like it has been fighting winter for many lifetimes and is losing by slow inches. You can see longboats resting on the frozen shoreline, pulled up like sleeping beasts under blankets of frost. Their carved prows are shaped like snarling creatures, a warning carved into wood. Even the boats here glare at you. People move through the village with the unhurried rhythm of those who have survived far too much weather. Their cloaks flap behind them as they walk, thick fur brushing against thick fur, and every person you pass gives you a quick, assessing glance. It is not rude. It is simply the Viking way of determining whether you are a friend, a threat, or someone who needs to be fed before they freeze into a decorative yard feature. You stand a little straighter because the eyes on you feel sharp, as if the whole village is quietly deciding where exactly to place you on the social shelf. You hear laughter. Ahead, loud and jagged, the kind that shakes the cold out of the air for a moment. A group is gathered around a fire pit, its flames struggling to stay upright against the wind. The Vikings cluster close, drinking something hot and powerful enough to make the scent sting your eyes. One of them waves you over, as if you have already been claimed by the warmth, whether you like it or not. You step closer, and the heat crawls over your hands, thawing your fingers in slow and suspicious stages. Someone hands you a drinking horn that probably violates at least 6 modern hygiene laws. The liquid inside is thick and sweet, and when it burns its way down your throat, your eyes water so fiercely you briefly wonder if this is an emotional response or a survival reflex. The group laughs again. They have been drinking this stuff since they were children, which explains a concerning amount about Viking personality development. As the fire crackles, you begin to understand why rules mattered here. The cold has a talent for sharpening emotions, and when you live in a place where stepping outside for fresh air can turn into an unintended farewell tour, you learn quickly that structure keeps people alive. You see a pair of warriors sharpening axes near the edge of the gathering, their movements precise and patient. They speak in low voices, never quite taking their eyes off the horizon. Out here, danger arrives quietly, so people stay louder than the landscape. You wander toward, the shoreline, following a path lined with frozen reeds that rattle like brittle chimes in the wind. The sea stretches before you in a wide sheet of steel gray, broken only by the bobbing shapes of seals who seem far too comfortable in this temperature. The air tastes like salt and cold iron. You feel small, which is a polite way of saying the environment could eat you if it wanted to. Yet there is a strange comfort settling inside your chest. Maybe it is the warmth from the fire still clinging to your skin, or maybe it is the way the village stands firm against the weather, as if daring the world to do its worst. You start to see why these people carved out rules like they were carving runes into stone. In a place where nature does not care about your schedule, routine becomes a way to anchor yourself in the madness. You feel the cold tug at your cloak again, and for a moment you imagine what it was like to live here every day, guided by customs that were born from necessity, fear, and an almost comical level of stubbornness. You take one more look at the village, its chimneys exhaling thin plumes of smoke into the sky, and you feel the ancient rhythm of this world press gently against your senses. It is harsh, unforgiving, and strangely inviting. The cold hums around you, a quiet reminder that you are only at the beginning. You notice it almost immediately, long before anyone bothers explaining it to you. Everything here has a rule, not suggestions, not guidelines, but rules carved into daily life with the same seriousness they carve symbols into stone. You watch a woman step into a doorway and brush snow off her boots in a very specific pattern. Heel, then toe, then heel again, as if some unseen inspector stands nearby checking her form. A pair of men pass each other on the path and exchange a nod that appears harmless until you realize it follows a sequence, a tiny ritual of acknowledgement that has been practiced for generations. It feels strange at first, but in this frozen world, strangeness is the standard operating procedure. You start to understand the logic when you see the weather shift without warning. One moment, the sun glints across the ice like polished silver. The next, the wind slams into the village with the enthusiasm of a drunken war god. It is the kind of climate that punishes hesitation. Here, rules are not about order for its own sake. They are survival strategies disguised as tradition. You watch a child no older than 7 instinctively secure the latch on a storage hut before the storm hits. Nobody tells him to. He simply does it, as if the knowledge was stitched into his mittens at birth. Inside the longhouse, the rules multiply like rabbits, though far heavier and armed. There is a place for your cloak, a place for your boots, and a place where absolutely nobody places anything unless they want to start a fight that ends with someone explaining themselves to a council of elders who all look like they were carved out of glacier ice. The hearth dominates the center of the room, and you learn quickly that you do not step between anyone and the fire unless you have a compelling reason, like being chased by a bear or possessed by a minor deity. The warmth is communal, but access to it follows an unspoken pecking order that everyone seems to understand intuitively. As you sit near the edge of the gathering, you hear the elder speak about the old days, her voice rough but steady. She explains that in a land where resources change personalities faster than people do, rules provide comfort. When food is scarce, you share according to rank. When storms rage, you shelter according to family order. When disputes arise, you settle them with processes so established that even the gods probably shrug and accept the outcome. You listen as she describes feuds that lasted generations, carefully managed by codes older than any living memory. It becomes clear that this society is not held together by force, but by ritual. You find yourself watching everything more closely. A man sharpening his blade checks the edge at consistent intervals, each movement nearly identical to the last. A group of women weaving cloth move in a synchronized rhythm that suggests the loom has its own personality and demands to be treated with proper respect. Even the way people drink follows rules, with rounds passed in a specific order so no one accidentally insults anyone's grandmother. living, or dead. You take a sip only when offered, because the alternative might involve explaining your existence to an ancestor who has been haunting the hall since the year 700. The more you observe, the more the rules stop feeling odd and start feeling strangely comforting. There is something reassuring about a world where everything has a place and every action has a pattern. The cold may be unpredictable, but the customs are not. When the wind howls outside, the structure inside feels like a fortress against chaos. You begin to see why these rules persisted long after the Vikings themselves faded into legend. Then it dawns on you. You follow rules from this world even now. You hold doors for strangers because somewhere deep in your cultural memory, a Viking would have wanted the same courtesy at a longhouse. You avoid sitting in certain spots out of habit, a residue from a time when seating arrangements determined whether you lived through dinner. You participate in gift-giving rituals that once served as strategic alliances, binding people together with tokens that meant far more than they appeared. You feel the threads connecting you to this ancient place, woven into your instincts like hidden runes. The rules they created were not just for living, they were for belonging. And without realizing it, you have been following their echoes all your life. You notice it the moment you step inside the longhouse. The noise hits you like a friendly avalanche, all sound and warmth and unfiltered enthusiasm. Viking hospitality is not a gentle invitation whispered across a polite table. It is a full-volume declaration that you exist. Therefore, you must be fed, warmed, and possibly interrogated about your ancestry. The rule here is simple. If someone walks through the door, everyone knows about it. Privacy is not a concept. It is a myth. The sort whispered about by travelers who have clearly never been to Scandinavia. The longhouse glows with firelight, flickering across shields hung like trophies and furs draped over benches. You barely have time to wipe the snow from your eyelashes before a large man with a beard that could shelter small animals calls out to you as if you have known each other for years. He waves you over with the enthusiasm of someone greeting a long-lost cousin, and suddenly a bowl of stew materializes in your hands. You did not ask for it. Nobody asks. Hospitality here is not optional. It is a law, older than the carved beams overhead. You try to thank them quietly, but quiet has no place in this room. Your soft words are swallowed instantly by laughter that shakes the rafters and arguments that sound aggressive, until you realize the men are only debating who once caught the larger fish. Every emotion is expressed at a volume that suggests you are sitting inside a thunderstorm with extremely good table service. You hear someone call for more drink, and by the time the sentence ends, your cup is full again. Vikings seem to have an uncanny ability to refill beverages before you even notice they are empty. There is a rhythm to it, you realize. A carefully orchestrated chaos where everyone is loud, everyone is busy, and everyone knows exactly what is happening at every corner of the hall. Hospitality is a battlefield of generosity. Hosts compete to provide the most comfort, the most food, the most warmth. If someone offers you bread, someone else offers you meat. If someone pours you ale, someone else decides to pour more because the first person clearly underestimated your thirst. You begin to understand why visitors rarely left a Viking feast sober or conscious. Still, beneath all the noise, you catch glimpses of intention, the way people make space for you near the fire, nudging each other aside with polite shoves, the way a young girl drapes a fur across your shoulders without waiting for permission, the way the older women glance at you, assessing whether you look warm enough, fed enough, or in danger of collapsing under the weight of all this unexpected kindness. Loud as it is, there is comfort woven into every gesture. A pair of warriors begin telling a story about their last voyage, gesturing wildly as if the boat is still beneath their feet. You nod along, though half the words sound like wind passing between mountains. The other half sound like boasts crafted by men who believe subtlety is a punishment. One slams his fist onto the table for emphasis, causing your cup to jump and your heart to reconsider its loyalties. But then he beams at you as if you alone understand him perfectly, and you find yourself laughing with the rest of them, swept into the tide of their energy. Then you realize something surprising. You feel welcome, genuinely welcome, not the surface-level politeness, from modern life, where someone offers you water with the tone of a person offering legal documents. Here, hospitality is loud because life is uncertain. Storms roll in without warning. Hunts go wrong. Ships vanish into the fog. When someone enters the hall alive, fed, and upright, that alone is cause for celebration. You understand now why this tradition survived into your world. You still shout greetings across rooms, still insist guests take the last slice even when you wanted it, still offer drinks with the enthusiasm of a Viking chieftain. The volume may have softened, the stew may have changed recipes, but the instinct remains. You celebrate the arrival of others. You are loud because they once were. You learn quickly that in this frozen world, a doorway is not just a piece of wood. It is a boundary line between safety and whatever waits outside in the dark. When you approach a longhouse, you feel a subtle tension in the air, as if the walls themselves are listening. You reach for the door out of habit, thinking you will simply walk in like you might today when visiting a friend. But a woman hauling firewood shoots you a look so sharp it could cut through ice. You stop mid-step. She jerks her chin toward the entrance. You realize you are expected to knock, not a gentle tap either. Vikings do not believe in half measures. You knock loudly, twice, because anything softer would be an invitation for suspicion. The moment your hand leaves the door, someone inside bellows for you to enter. The kind of invitation that sounds like it was pulled from the lungs of a bear who just finished wrestling a boulder. You step inside, trying to look calm, even though your heart is racing like someone just told it a secret it does not want. Once you settle near the fire, someone explains in a tone far too casual that the knocking ritual began because you never knew what would be standing on the other side of the door. A neighbor? A traveling trader? A berserker with emotional issues? A wolf that figured out hinges? The Norse had no interest in surprises. Knocking gave everyone a moment to prepare, adjust their posture, and possibly hide anything embarrassing, like an unfinished carving or an elder who fell asleep face down in the stew. You watch the door throughout the evening and begin noticing a pattern. Every time someone approaches, they knock with the confidence of a person announcing their presence to fate itself. There is no such thing as a shy knock here. If you knock too quietly, they assume you are hiding something, and hiding something in this world is rarely harmless. People learned long ago that danger does not always stomp its feet. Sometimes it tiptoes, sometimes it enters without warning, sometimes it pretends to be a guest. So Vikings demanded certainty before they opened the door. The elders talk about nights when storms howled so loudly you could barely hear your own thoughts. During those nights, a knock became more than courtesy. It was proof of life, a sign that whoever stood outside was human, awake, and hopefully friendly. They describe visitors arriving with snow packed into their beards and eyes glazed from cold, knocking just hard enough to remind everyone inside that they had not frozen mid-step. Opening the door too soon meant letting in wind, ice, or whatever unfortunate creature had decided to lurk outside. Waiting for a knock was survival, patience wrapped in paranoia. As you listen, you begin connecting the dots to your own world. You knock before entering rooms even when no danger lurks beyond the threshold. You announce yourself at friends' houses with a hesitant tap, as if alerting ancient spirits that you come in peace. You send messages before arriving, warning people that you are on your way. The ritual has changed shape, but the instinct remains. You are reenacting a 1,000-year-old habit born from fear of the unknown. The fire crackles beside you as a man sharpens his knife, the sound scraping across the wood like slow thunder. He tells you that in Viking times, opening a door unannounced was practically an act of war. A stranger, appearing without warning, might trigger every fight or flight instinct in the room, and someone would likely throw a spear before asking questions. Hospitality mattered deeply, but so did preparation. Knocking was the bridge between caution and welcome. Later in the night, when the longhouse quiets and the wind curls around the walls like a restless spirit, you step outside for a breath of cold air. The stars scatter across the sky in bright clusters. The village sleeps, but the rule stands firm. Every door is shut tight, every entrance waiting for the right knock. You feel the weight of that tradition settle into your awareness, ancient and familiar all at once. You understand now that your polite knock is not modern manners. It is inherited instinct, a whisper from a frozen age reminding you that entry should always be announced. In the silence, you raise your hand and knock once on the wooden beam beside you, just to feel the echo. It resonates softly, a gesture rooted in a world where being heard could save your life. You notice the seat before anyone mentions it. A broad wooden chair carved with spiraling patterns, positioned close to the fire where the warmth blooms brightest. It has an authority about it, the kind of place a leader would naturally occupy, the kind of place you instinctively avoid because you are unsure whether sitting there earns admiration or immediate relocation by force. The Vikings call it the high seat, though it is not actually elevated. It simply radiates importance the way a thundercloud radiates warnings. You watch as people come and go, shuffling benches, nudging stools, settling into places without ceremony. The high seat, however, remains open far longer than you expect, almost as though it is waiting for something. Then you notice the shift. A chieftain steps inside, brushing snow from his shoulders, and before he even removes his cloak, two women gesture toward the seat. He sits, but not for long. Moments later, he rises again, motioning for an older man to take his place. The elder hesitates, shaking his head, but the chieftain insists. Eventually they both settle, one perched slightly on the edge, the other leaning in, sharing the place as if neither wants the full weight of it. You realize this is not a single person's chair. It is a rotating throne of sorts, passed around like a torch so no one burns their hands holding it too long. Someone explains to you in a low murmur that honor among Vikings is not static. It is fluid, shifting from person to person depending on the moment. The high seat is for whoever has earned respect that day, not necessarily the one who holds the most impressive title. A warrior returning from a journey might sit there briefly. A visiting seer might take it for an hour. A farmer who saved a neighbor's animals from a storm might claim it without argument. The seat moves because honor moves. You start noticing the small nods exchanged when someone is offered the place. Some accept with pride, others with reluctance, all aware of the eyes watching. Sitting there means being seen, evaluated, maybe even envied. It is a privilege, but also a responsibility. If you take the seat, you better have something worth listening to, and if you do not, someone will politely cough until you vacate in embarrassment. The fire casts long shadows across the hall as the night grows deeper. Food is passed around in heavy wooden bowls, and every so often the high seat shifts occupants. A woman who tells stories with a voice that dances across the person. Flames takes the seat for an entire tale. When she finishes, people lean back with the satisfied sigh of those who briefly forgot how harsh life can be. A young man sits next, radiant with pride after besting his cousin in a contest involving throwing logs farther than should be physically possible. The room cheers as he settles in, though he nearly falls off, clearly unprepared for the responsibility of staying still. Later, when there is a quiet lull, you feel a hand on your shoulder. It is the chieftain again, his eyes gleaming with the warmth of someone who has had more than enough to drink, but still understands the gravity of what he is doing. He nods toward the high seat. For a moment, you think he must be mistaken. You have done nothing of note. You have not hunted anything, or wrestled any mythical creatures, or even sharpened a knife without supervision. Yet he insists, his expression firm but kind. You sit with caution, feeling the weight of 1,000 stories sink into the wood beneath you. The seat does not feel comfortable exactly. It feels significant, as if you have borrowed something ancient for a brief moment. People glance your way, not with judgment, but with curiosity. You are a visitor, an outsider, yet you are here, present, included. In this world, that alone is enough to earn a place of honor. You understand suddenly why this tradition survives in quieter forms in your own world. You offer guests the best chair, the comfiest seat, the spot closest to the warmth. You insist someone else take the place of comfort even when you secretly want it. You call it politeness, but it is older than that. It is Viking logic. The seat of honor belongs to whoever needs it most in the moment, or whoever carries the story worth sharing. You remain there only a little while before offering it forward, because you feel the truth settle in your chest. Honor is shared, and the seat is never meant to stay still. The rule reveals itself before anyone speaks it aloud. You step through the doorway, brushing snow from your cloak, and within seconds, a bowl is pushed into your hands with the force of someone trying to save your life. You barely manage to keep hold of it. The heat seeps instantly into your fingers, and the smell rises in a thick, earthy cloud that suggests vegetables, meat, and possibly something that once roamed the woods with confidence. The Vikings around you watch with the expectant expressions of people waiting to see if you will survive your first bite. You do not get to sit down before another bowl appears, then a slab of bread, then something that might be cheese but has the approximate density of a throwing stone. You try to say you are fine, you are not even hungry, but they do not care. Hunger is not the point. Feeding you is the point. In this world, offering food is the first line of defense against everything from frostbite to bad intentions. A stranger with a full stomach is less likely to start trouble. A stranger with an empty one might steal your last dried fish in the middle of the night. Vikings prefer to eliminate that possibility before your boots even melt the snow on the threshold. You sit because someone pushes you gently but firmly toward a bench that seems to materialize for this exact purpose. The fire crackles like it is in on the cultural secret. A woman ladles more stew into your bowl, even though you have not taken a single bite yet. She tells you, the rule is simple. Strangers must be fed immediately. The sooner, the better. Ideally before they introduce themselves. Names can wait. Hunger cannot. You nod, mostly because your mouth is already full, and any attempt at speaking would result in stew becoming a decorative feature of the longhouse floor. As you eat, you watch the room with growing curiosity. Everyone else seems to understand exactly how this works. When a hunter enters with his beard full of frost, 3 hands reach out to feed him before he can even shrug off his cloak. When a traveler arrives from a distant settlement, she is ushered toward the fire, cup filled, plate piled high. No one asks what she wants. They already assume the answer. Food first, introductions later, judgments much later, and only after dessert. Someone explains that long ago, feeding strangers was not just kindness, it was strategy. In a land where winter could kill faster than any blade, refusing food to someone in need was practically inviting misfortune into your home. Every traveler who passed through became a potential ally, and every ally strengthened your chances of surviving the season. Even enemies were fed, because attacking someone with warm hands and a full belly was considered dishonorable. The Vikings were many things, but they had very firm opinions about dishonor. It usually involved axes, You take another spoonful, feeling warmth spread through your chest, settling deeper than the fire's glow ever could. The noise of the hall blends into a kind of comforting thunder, voices rising and falling in messy harmony. You begin to relax, aware now that feeding you is not an act of generosity they debate. It is automatic, instinctive, a duty woven into their bones. For a moment you wonder what would happen if you refused a meal here. The thought alone earns a horrified gasp from the woman sitting beside you, as if you just announced an intention to insult every ancestor in the room. Much later, when your bowl is finally empty and your stomach feels dangerously optimistic, you realize how familiar this rule is. You do not live in a frozen wooden hall, yet you have inherited the when guests enter your home, you offer snacks before questions. You feel strangely rude if someone sits down without a drink in their hand. You bring food to gatherings, to new neighbors, to anyone who looks like they might crumble emotionally if left unfed. You tell yourself it is politeness, but now you see its true age. You are echoing the instincts of people who believed feeding strangers kept misfortune away and forged connection in a world where connection meant survival. The Vikings watch you finish your meal with approving nods. You are no longer just a visitor. You are someone who has eaten at their fire. In this culture, that alone means you belong, at least for tonight. The rule has done its work. You are fed. You are human. You are one of them, if only until the snow melts from your boots. You notice it the morning after your first night in the longhouse. The place is loud, smoky, and full of people who swing axes for fun, yet somehow they are cleaner than you expected. Much cleaner, unsettlingly clean. You wake thinking everyone will be stumbling around like a herd of frostbitten bears, but instead, you find half the village outside by a frozen stream, scrubbing, rinsing, and grooming with the seriousness of monks tending sacred relics. You wander out, breath fogging in the air, expecting someone to laugh at the idea of washing in temperatures that cause water to question its own existence. But the Vikings are unfazed. This, they tell you, is what keeps a person civilized. One man dips his entire face into the stream with the enthusiasm of someone greeting an old friend, then lifts his head and shakes off the water like a very dignified dog. Another carefully washes his hair with a comb carved from bone, sliding it through the strands with a precision that suggests he is preparing for a feast or possibly a dramatic entrance. A woman scrubs her hands clean, paying special attention to her nails, which look far more polished than someone who spends her life hauling firewood should reasonably achieve. They all move with purpose, each gesture part of a routine older than the settlement itself. You shiver just watching them, but they insist cleanliness is not vanity here, it is survival. Dirt leads to illness, illness leads to weakness, weakness leads to someone else needing to chop your wood, build your fence, or finish your chores. And nobody wants to take on extra chores in a land where daily life is already a full-time argument with nature. Cleanliness keeps you functional. Cleanliness keeps you part of the group. Back inside, the longhouse smells faintly of smoke, brewed herbs, and something pleasantly pine-scented. You watch as people brush their hair before breakfast, binding it tightly so it does not swing into the stew pot or get caught in a shield during an emergency practice duel, which happens more often than anyone admits. Children wash their faces because their mothers demand it, but also because skipping it means the nearest elder will comment loudly about being raised by wolves. You get the impression that appearing dirty here is a mild social crime, just barely above forgetting someone's name and far beneath giving bad advice during a storm. There is a special day, they tell you, called Saturday, devoted entirely to bathing. Not sometimes, every week, even in winter. Even when the wind howls like a pack of offended spirits and the ice crackles under your feet. They heat water in great vats, pour it into wooden tubs, and take turns soaking until they emerge warm. and pink and pleased with themselves. They comb their hair, trim their beards, braid whatever can be braided, and sprinkle fragrant herbs, because looking terrifying does not mean you cannot smell delightful. You spot a man with arms the size of tree trunks, rubbing scented oil into his beard with gentle care. He sees your expression and snorts. "Clean warriors live longer," he says, because enemies are too distracted wondering why they smell good. You are not entirely convinced, but the logic does have a strange charm. As the day unfolds, you begin noticing the echoes of these routines to your own life. You shower on weekends even when you do not have plans. You comb your hair before leaving the house, even if you are just buying something quick. You feel strangely obligated to smell at least presentable when having guests over. You call it hygiene, but deep down you sense the ancient rhythm behind it. A rhythm born from cold mornings, shared tubs, and a culture that believed being clean made you not only healthier, but more trustworthy. Later, as the sun dips low and the cold deepens, you sit near the fire watching everyone finish their nightly wash at the basin. They chat as they scrub, tease each other for splashing too much, and laugh at the steam rising from their hands. There is joy in it, this simple act of rinsing away the day. You feel it too, a softness that settles into your bones, reminding you that cleanliness here is less about appearance and more about belonging. You wash your hands in warm water, feeling the heat seep through your skin, and suddenly it makes perfect sense. You do these things not because someone told you they matter, but because somewhere in your ancient memory, a Viking voice insists a clean person is ready for whatever comes next. You first witness it during a feast, when the longhouse is loud enough to shake the walls and the fire blazes as if trying to outdo the sun. You expect the night to be all shouting, drinking, and questionable dares. But then something shifts. A man stands, reaches into a pouch, and places a small carved token into another warrior's hand. It is a simple gesture, brief and unceremonious. Yet the reaction around the hall softens. The recipient grips the gift with surprising reverence, nodding once in a way that feels heavier than any boast or battle story. You sense instantly that this exchange means far more than the object itself. It happens again minutes later. A woman offers her sister a length of dyed wool. A boy presents his grandmother with a polished stone from the shore. None of the gifts are extravagant, but each is given as if passing a spark from one heart to another. The longhouse glows not only with firelight, but with the warmth of rituals that have stitched this community together for centuries. Something in the moment pulls you in, even though you are only meant to be watching from the sidelines. Someone tells you quietly that Viking gift-giving was never about wealth. It was about obligation wrapped inside kindness. Give someone a token, and you tie them to you with a thread of honor. Receive something, and you are bound to return the gesture someday, not necessarily with something equal in value, but equal in meaning. These exchanges build alliances, settle tensions, and sometimes preempt disasters in ways more effective than any shouted negotiation. A gift, they say, has a memory, and that memory lingers longer than many friendships. As the night continues, you find yourself noticing how often hands drift toward pouches or pockets, fingers brushing over small items that might one day be offered to someone at the right moment. You watch a warrior pause before giving a young hunter a knife with a bone handle, his eyes softening as if seeing some reflection of himself in the boy. The hunter's face lights up, and suddenly the entire table leans in, collectively witnessing the creation of a bond that will shape future feasts, future journeys, perhaps even future decisions in battles yet to come. The meaning begins to settle into you as the fire crackles and the air warms. Gifts here are not decorations, they are reminders, promises, anchors in a world that can feel as unpredictable as the storms crashing outside. You understand why the custom refuses to disappear, surviving long after longboats stopped cutting across icy seas. You think about your own life, about the small things you give without thinking, the gestures that feel instinctive, bringing a bottle of something when visiting a friend, offering homemade food to a neighbor, wrapping gifts for celebrations, even when nobody demands it. You feel compelled to mark important moments with objects, tokens, tiny pieces of yourself extended outward. You always assumed it was habit, but now you see its ancient root. You are echoing a Viking tradition without ever knowing you borrowed it. Then the unexpected happens. A woman with bright eyes and wind-burned cheeks walks toward you. She carries a small wooden bead carved with a pattern you do not recognize. She presses it into your palm without flourish, without speech, just a simple nod. The bead is warm from her hand. You stare at it, unsure what the proper response is, until she smiles and tells you it is a welcome, a recognition that you have shared their fire, eaten their food, and listened to their stories without judgment. It means you belong here, if only briefly. The room seems to hush, not because of you, but because moments like this always draw attention. People glance your way, nodding approvingly. You feel something tighten in your chest, not in fear, but in a way that feels older than anything you have known. A gift is never small here. It carries the weight of the giver's trust. You close your fingers around the bead, feeling its smooth edges press gently into your palm. The fire pops behind you. The hall swells with laughter once more. But the moment stays fixed in your mind, delicate and powerful all at once. You understand now why gift-giving never died. It carries the quiet magic of connection, the kind that stretches across a millennium and still finds a place in your hands. You notice it first during a quiet lull, when the longhouse settles into that comfortable murmur that fills the space after a feast. People talk, trade stories, pass cups, shift furs, but no one, absolutely no one, is walking around with empty hands. You catch yourself doing it, standing near the fire with nothing but your own fingers dangling uselessly. At your sides, a warrior passing by gives you a look, not unkind but alarmingly curious, as if he is briefly considering whether you are plotting something unfortunate. You quickly reach for a mug on the table, even though you are not thirsty, because it feels suddenly dangerous to let your hands hang free. Later, you see the same reaction again. A young man crosses the hall carrying 2 wooden bowls stacked neatly, and nobody blinks. A woman shuffles past holding a small bundle of herbs. And again, nothing unusual. But the moment a visitor places his cup down and starts walking toward the doorway, chatter dies for a fraction of a heartbeat. It is subtle, barely noticeable, yet the tension hums through the air. Someone hurries forward, handing him a small knife to return to the hearth or a scrap of cloth that clearly serves no purpose, and only then does the room relax. You ask why. Not directly, of course. You learned your lesson about announcing yourself before performing any act that might be interpreted as suspicious by Viking standards, which includes breathing too quietly. So instead, you mention it casually to an older woman as she braids her hair, and she nods, with a knowing smile, as if she has been waiting for you to notice. Empty hands, she explains, were once a warning sign. In a land where surprise visitors might be friend or foe, the sight of bare hands meant uncertainty. Were you reaching for a weapon, hiding something behind your back, preparing to bolt? Vikings lived in a world where the difference between a peaceful greeting and an ambush could be measured in heartbeats. So carrying something became a way to signal intention. Hands full meant hands harmless, and hands harmless meant you would not end your day dodging a spear. Suddenly, the hall looks different to you. You see objects being passed not just for practicality, but as tiny assurances exchanged silently between people. You watch a woman hand her sister a carved comb, not because the sister needs it, but because she is about to cross the room and it is better to go. Holding something, anything. You notice men lingering near tables for an extra moment to pick up tools before joining a conversation. Children carry small toys or wooden scraps like miniature shields against suspicion. The hall choreographs itself into a subtle dance of full hands, harmless hands, safe hands. You begin to understand why the taboo settled so deeply into their culture. In a world of uncertain visitors, of harsh winters and feuds that could flare from a single misinterpreted gesture, carrying something small prevented misunderstandings with catastrophic consequences. A bowl, a cloth, a piece of kindling. Even a loaf of bread could communicate trust faster than any spoken assurance. Hours pass, and you feel the habit worming its way into your instincts. You find yourself reaching for items without thinking, holding a cup even after it has gone cold, carrying a stray piece of wood as you walk from one end of the hall to the other. You tell yourself you are blending in, but deep down, you feel the truth settling into your bones. The gesture feels good. It feels safe. It feels strangely right. Later, by the fire, you think about your own world and how often you cradle objects absent-mindedly, holding your phone while walking through a store, gripping keys when talking to someone unfamiliar, carrying a drink during gatherings even when you are not sipping it. You always thought it was habit, awkwardness, maybe even comfort. But now you recognize an ancient echo. Your body prefers full hands because once, long ago, someone's safety depended on it. As the night deepens and the hall grows quieter, you watch a man move toward the door. Before he steps outside, he picks up a small torch. Not for light, not for warmth, simply because walking out empty-handed feels wrong. The gesture is small, instinctive, almost invisible, but it speaks the language of 1,000 winters. You sit down at the longhouse table expecting chaos. After all, this is the land of warriors who wrestle storms, wrestle bears, and probably wrestle their own shadows for entertainment. You imagine food flying, bones cracking, and someone getting stabbed because they reached for the wrong piece of smoked fish. Instead, you find something far more unsettling. There are rules. So many rules. Enough to make you sit a little straighter, tuck your elbows in, and question every reckless decision you have ever made with a fork. The table stretches nearly the length of the hall, lined with wooden trenchers, knives polished to mirror shine, and cups made from horn so smooth they gleam in the firelight. People sit close, because warmth is a resource and personal space is a myth, but they follow a rhythm so precise it feels like a ritual. You watch a man wait patiently for his neighbor to take the first bite before lifting his own food. Another takes care not to cut across the board in a way that might flick crumbs in someone else's direction. Even the loud talkers quiet themselves slightly when meat is served, and the rowdiest man at the table chews with surprising dignity. Nobody here would call this etiquette. They would call it survival, because if you annoyed the wrong person during dinner, you did not just get a dirty look. You risked the kind of conflict that ended with your name sung sadly at funerals. So they built rules, simple and sturdy, meant to keep blood off the table and tempers from boiling while stew simmered. Over time, these rules turned into expectations, and those expectations hardened into customs, and before anyone realized it, Vikings had become shockingly civilized at supper. You notice it in the way hands move, never reaching across someone without asking, never taking the biggest portion first, never speaking while chewing, unless you wanted the entire table to silently agree that you had the social awareness of a wet fish. There is respect woven into every motion, a quiet understanding that food is sacred because life is hard, and the table is one of the few places where anyone can feel briefly safe. And somewhere inside that tangle of manners, you start to recognize something uncomfortably familiar. You think about modern dining, where you wait for others before lifting your fork, even if you are ravenous. You think about the way you pass dishes clockwise, because going the other direction would feel like slipping into an alternate universe. You think about how you instinctively avoid talking with your mouth full, even though nobody officially taught you, as if some ancient hand tugged your wrist whenever you tried. You realize that every time you hesitate before taking the last slice of anything at a gathering, you are following a Viking who once thought, if I take this, the last piece of bread, without offering it first, I might get chased into a fjord. The longhouse reinforces this message with every small gesture. A woman across from you places a piece of meat on her neighbor's plate without being asked. It is a courtesy, but it is also an unspoken announcement that she sees him, respects him, and is invested in maintaining peace. You watch as a man pours ale for the person beside him before filling his own cup, and you recall doing the same for friends at modern dinners without ever wondering why. As the fire crackles behind you and snow hisses softly against the walls, you see more echoes, the way they sit with backs straight, because slouching during a communal meal once signaled weakness or disrespect, the way they keep knives pointed down, never angled toward a neighbor, even the way they stay until everyone has finished, rising together as, though the act of standing too soon might shatter the fragile unity forged during supper, you begin to see your own habits differently. The polite restraint you show at a restaurant, the instinct to let others choose their seats first, the quiet apology you make when your elbow bumps someone during a meal. These things did not appear out of nowhere. They drifted into your world with the smoke of 1,000 longhouse hearths carried across oceans, centuries, languages, and customs, until they found a home in your fingers and posture. By the time the feast ends, you feel oddly proud of your manners, as if you have passed a test you never knew you were taking. You place your cup down gently, thank the person beside you without thinking, and rise only when the rest of the table moves with you. The habits feel timeless, steady, almost ancient, and as you step away from the table, you realize something remarkable. You have not escaped Viking etiquette. You have been living by it your entire life. You step into the longhouse again, expecting warmth, fire, and the usual avalanche of Viking enthusiasm. But this time you notice something different, something subtle that threads through the room like a quiet warning. Every seat is taken with intention. Every back is pressed against a wall or solid beam. Even the most carefree warrior positions himself with the awareness of someone who has spent a lifetime expecting danger to burst through the door like an uninvited guest. You move toward an empty bench near the center of the hall, ready to sit, but a hand stops you. A woman with sharp eyes and an expression that suggests she has survived more winters than you have had. Birthdays gestures firmly toward a seat along the wall. It is a gentle nudge, but the meaning is carved into her stare. Sit there, not here. You follow her guidance because ignoring a Viking's seating suggestion feels like a fast way to meet the afterlife. Once you settle near the wall, the logic spreads through your mind like creeping frost. In this world, danger does not give warnings. Raiders, feuds, curses, runaway livestock, all of it can explode into the hall without ceremony. Sitting with your back exposed is the medieval equivalent of shouting into the void, "I trust everyone completely." It is an optimistic approach to life. It is also a risky one. Vikings prefer guarantees, even small ones. A wall behind you means no one can surprise you. It means you have a fighting chance. You watch the others and realize how deeply the habit runs. A group of warriors shuffle along a bench so they can face the door as a unit. Their movements practiced, silent, almost choreographed. Children mimic them, sliding instinctively until their backs touch something sturdy. Even the elderly, who have seen enough chaos to deserve a peaceful meal, angle themselves to keep their eyes on the room. It is not fear. It is vigilance born from centuries of storms, feuds, and unpredictable neighbors. You catch your reflection in a polished shield hanging beside you. There you are, sitting exactly the way you do at modern restaurants, back against the wall, eyes on exits, comfort blooming only when you can see the whole room. You always assumed it was personal preference, a quirky habit, or a leftover bit of social anxiety. Now you understand. The preference is carved into your bones by people who believed survival depended on knowing what approached from the shadows. A man across from you slams his cup down with good humor, but his gaze never drifts from the doorway. He laughs loudly, tells a story about a fishing accident that sounds suspiciously like a battle, and shoves roasted meat toward you with friendly insistence. Yet he sits with the discipline of someone who expects trouble. His cheer does not soften his awareness. Vikings understood that joy and caution can coexist, each feeding the other like flame and smoke. You glance back at the hall's entrance. It looks innocent enough, framed with carved serpents and warmed by torchlight. But you see what they see. A doorway is a mouth, and anything can come through it. A friend, a stranger, a man who wants to trade goods, or a man who wants to take your head. You begin to feel the tension hum beneath every conversation. It is not paranoia. It is preparation, quiet and steady, woven into life like breath. Someone sets a bowl in front of you, overflowing with stew. You thank them and start to relax. But the old woman from earlier taps your shoulder. She nods toward the door again. You shift slightly in your seat until you have a clear view of it, and the tightness in your chest eases. You feel strangely proud of yourself, as if some ancient judge has marked your behavior as acceptable. Guest, unlikely to die immediately. The fire pops, laughter swells, and the hall feels warmer. Yet the rule remains. You sit with your back protected because they once did. Because centuries of caution hardened into instinct, because survival traditions rarely fade even when the danger does. You used to think you simply liked sitting where you could see everything. Now you know the truth. You are honoring the oldest safety rule in the Norse world. The wall at your back is more than comfort. It is memory. The longhouse breathes around you, warm and smoky, a living creature built of timber, fur, and the restless exhalations of everyone packed inside. You feel the heat first, heavy and thick, the kind that clings to your clothes and sinks into your bones. Fires crackle, oil lamps sputter, and bodies shift in tightly layered rows. It is cozy in the way a stuffed oven is cozy. You inhale, expecting the richness of stew and wood smoke, but the air wraps itself around your lungs like a wool blanket with opinions. A minute passes, then two, and you feel a subtle panic rise. You need fresh air. Before you can decide whether bolting for the door would cause a diplomatic incident, a man near the window wedges his shoulder under the wooden shutter and pushes it outward. A blast of icy wind cuts into the room, slicing through the heat like a welcome blade. Sparks swirl. A few candles flicker, and half the longhouse sighs at once. You join them without meaning to, releasing a breath that feels older than your own life. Fresh air, someone mutters approvingly, as though the cold itself has performed a sacred duty. You realize quickly this is not a rare event. Every few minutes, someone cracks a window, props open a door, or lifts a shutter with the same reverence one. Reserves for divine blessings. It does not matter that the wind brings snowflakes and frost that creeps along the walls. The Vikings prefer discomfort over staleness. They would rather risk freezing their eyebrows off than breathe the same trapped smoke twice. You watch as a woman throws a pelt aside to let in another gust of air. Her hair whips around her face, her cheeks redden instantly, but she smiles like the storm is an old friend. A pair of children take advantage of the moment to stick their hands outside, squealing as the cold nips their skin. Nobody stops them. If anything, an elder nods approvingly, as if frostbite builds character. You understand the logic soon enough. In this world, everything burns. Fat in the lamps, driftwood in the hearth, and sometimes food with the enthusiasm of cooks who prefer flavor to precision. Without fresh air, smoke thickens until it forms a visible haze. The roof beams disappear behind it, the rafters blur, and your breathing becomes a task rather than a reflex. You wonder how many ancestors developed impressive lung capacity simply by living indoors. But there is more to it than survival. Opening the windows is a ritual of vigilance. Someone always keeps an eye on the horizon, watching for ships, enemies, weather, or the occasional wandering animal looking for an unplanned visit. A closed window means blindness, and blindness means danger. Fresh air is not just comfort, it is awareness. You feel it seeping into you, this instinct that the walls should never muffle the outside world entirely. You think of your own habits, the way you crack a window at night even when the temperature argues against it, the way you open your car windows before turning on the fan, the way you step outside for a deep breath when a room feels too heavy. You always assumed these were quirks, some modern preference for crisp air, or a subconscious rebellion against stale spaces. Now you see the truth. You are reenacting something carved into your lineage long before modern ventilation existed. You are echoing people who feared what they could not see and trusted the wind to reveal what walls might hide. You open windows not because you want to, but because something ancient inside you insists the air must move. A man beside you stands, pushes open the shutter again, and inhales deeply. Snow blows across the floor, melting into dark streaks. He nods to himself, as if satisfied with a job well done. The fire sputters. Children laugh as cold air curls around their ankles. The longhouse settles into a new balance, part warmth, part winter. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the breeze touch your skin. It wakes you gently, like a memory resurfacing. You breathe again, and this time it feels right. You find yourself standing in the open air of a Viking settlement, the wind sweeping across the fjord with the kind of icy encouragement that makes you rethink every life choice that led you here. Yet the people around you are not bothered by the cold. They stand in a loose circle, shoulders squared, voices steady, eyes sharp with an intensity usually reserved for battle. You do not know what is happening at first, only that the air feels charged, like a storm preparing to take human form. Then, someone steps forward, raises a hand, and speaks with the solemnity of a person declaring their fate to the universe. They are making an oath, not a promise, not a casual agreement, not the kind of half-hearted commitment you mumble to yourself at the start of a new year. This is an oath in the Viking sense, sealed with honor, reputation, and the looming possibility that if you break it, someone will politely but firmly challenge you to combat. You watch the ritual unfold, and a strange recognition rises inside you. The seriousness, the ceremony, the collective witness. It all feels familiar, though you cannot explain why. The warrior finishes speaking. He places his hand on a carved stone, a gesture so precise it might as well be carved into the laws of the cosmos. The group murmurs approval. Some nod solemnly. One man mutters something that sounds like formal validation. The oath is accepted. And for a moment, the world seems to pause around it, as though the air itself is taking notes. You realize quickly this is not a special occasion. People here swear oaths the way modern people sign digital forms, with speed and absolute conviction. A man promises to assist a neighbor through the winter, and the entire longhouse pauses to witness. A woman pledges to repay a debt by spring, and half the settlement nods as if recording the details in memory. Even small things become sacred when witnessed. A simple agreement to share the next sheep slaughter can feel like a binding contract written in the stars. You sense the gravity of it. Vikings believed words had weight, almost a physical presence, the kind that could either support the community or tear it apart. Oaths controlled feuds, maintained alliances, shaped marriages, and determined who followed whom into battle. Breaking an oath was not just dishonorable, it was dangerous. A broken promise could split families, ignite revenge, unleash a chain of consequences that left scars across generations. and suddenly, your own life begins to unfold in your thoughts. The way you promise things with more weight when you say them in front of others. The way certain commitments feel more real when witnessed. The way you hesitate before breaking your word even in small things, sensing some ancient instinct twitching inside your chest. You remember moments when you declared something aloud and felt the universe adjust around you. Listening, you watch as another oath is made. This one lighthearted, a vow between friends involving the next time they go raiding, their tone half play and half sincerity. Yet even here, the group listens closely. Jokes are allowed, but lies are not. You feel the sacredness slip into your bones. You understand that this culture carved its expectations into its people, and those people carved them into time itself. Inside the longhouse later, you notice it again. Someone promises to repair a broken tool. Another swears to return a borrowed cloak. A third vows to drink only half as much next feast night because the last attempt ended poorly. Every declaration becomes a miniature ceremony because the act of speaking truthfully binds people together. You sip warm broth and feel the weight of your quiet thoughts. You think of the modern world where you tell friends, "I swear I'll be there," and something inside you tightens, urging you to mean it. You think of the promises you refuse to break, even when nobody would notice, and you recognize the old lineage behind that strange devotion. You are not simply keeping your word. You are honoring the echo of people who believed words could build worlds. A final oath is spoken before the night ends, a promise of peace between two men whose tension crackled earlier like sparks from the fire. The settlement watches, listens, accepts. When the men clasp arms, the hall exhales as one. You feel it settle deep within you, the instinct to pledge, to declare, to bind your intentions to your voice. You never questioned it before. Now you know where it was born. You carry Viking oaths in your lungs every time you vow anything at all. You wake to the soft groan of the longhouse settling around you, beams expanding against the cold and the faint shuffle of early risers preparing for the day. The air still smells of banked embers and the lingering traces of last night's feast. But beneath that rests a sharper scent, something brisk and commanding. Morning here is not gentle. It is purposeful. Before you can decide whether to stretch or crawl deeper under the furs, a voice cuts through the dimness, firm and unmistakably expectant. It is time for inspection. You sit up groggily, blinking through the low light, and quickly realize everyone else is already awake. Children rub their eyes while standing in a line, their hair sticking out in every direction like startled hedgehogs. Warriors tug on their boots, straightening their belts with the seriousness of men expecting to be judged by the gods themselves. Even the elders rise slowly but deliberately, smoothing their tunics, adjusting their cloaks, and preparing for what looks less like mourning and more like a ritual staged for an audience. You shuffle into place, trying to mimic the posture of the Vikings around you. A woman with a braid long enough to qualify as a small rope walks down the row, scanning each face like she has memorized every freckle. She checks hands for cuts, nails for dirt, clothing for wear, and eyes for the unmistakable signs of sleep that suggest someone stayed up too late telling ghost stories again. She moves with the confidence of someone who has performed this task since before you were born. You are not exempt. When she reaches you, her gaze sweeps over your clothes, your hair, the way you hold yourself. She does not speak, but her raised eyebrow does most of the work. You hastily pull your cloak tighter, trying to look more presentable. She gives a curt nod and moves on, leaving you with the unsettling sense that you have just been graded. The next phase begins immediately. The chieftain steps forward, his expression solemn. He asks each person a quick question about their plans for the day, ensuring no one attempts something foolish without telling the group. Not because he wants control, but because Vikings consider each person's actions woven into the safety of everyone else. A hunter planning to venture into the woods must say so. A farmer intending to repair a fence must announce it. A child hoping to join a gathering task must declare their intent with the seriousness of someone entering negotiations. It feels dramatic, even excessive, until you realize the truth. This ritual started because in Viking lands, one wrong morning choice could doom an entire family. A forgotten tool, a missed signal, a poorly secured door, even a child wandering too close to the shoreline could invite disaster. Morning inspection was their safeguard, their way of seeing each other clearly before the world's chaos had a chance to intervene. As the process continues, you feel a curious warmth settling through the hall. What first seemed like scrutiny now feels like care disguised as discipline. They are not just checking for clean faces or straight belts. They are checking for well-being, for signs of illness, for exhaustion, for hidden injuries that pride might conceal, for the small cracks that danger could widen. When a young man winces as he lifts his arm, 3 people immediately crowd around him. They ask questions, inspect the bruise, and insist he change his plans for the day. He protests weakly, but everyone ignores him. His safety outranks his pride. You watch this and feel a strange tug behind your ribs. You think of modern life, the way parents check on sleepy children before school, the way partners glance at each other in the morning to see how the night went, the way you ask friends, "You good?" without thinking. You realize the instinct did not appear from nowhere. It drifted down from ancestors who believed morning was the moment to reset the world, to ensure nothing important slipped into the shadows unnoticed. Eventually the ritual ends, and the longhouse comes alive with motion. People gather tools, prepare meals, call out instructions. You feel more awake than you expected, your mind sharper, your purpose clearer. Being seen does that to a person. As you step outside into the crisp morning air, you feel the echo of the ritual settle quietly inside you, deep and familiar. You understand now why you check the locks, why you straighten your clothes, why you pause each morning to make sure everything is in its place. You are performing a Viking inspection every single day. You notice it first during an evening in the longhouse, when the fire burns low and the glow casts long shadows that sway like restless spirits. People speak in voices warmed by ale and comfort, yet every so often someone says a phrase that feels different, heavier, older. You cannot explain why your skin prickles when you hear it, only that it lands with a kind of quiet power you recognize without understanding. A woman drops a piece of bread and mutters a phrase under her breath. A child sneezes, and 3 people recite something in unison, quick as lightning, as if trying to outrun misfortune. You realize the hall is peppered with these tiny utterances that slip out like breath. They do not sound ceremonial. They sound like habits so deeply ingrained they happen before the speaker even thinks. You lean closer to the fire, listening as a man stumbles his words and instantly corrects himself with a phrase that makes the people nearby nod approvingly. The hair on the back of your neck rises. These are not casual expressions. These are remnants of magical protections, disguised now as ordinary speech. Someone explains it to you after they catch your confused stare. Long ago, the Norse believed that words were threads weaving through the fabric of fate. Speak the right ones, and you strengthened the weave. Speak the wrong ones, and you weakened it. Silence invited mischief, and carelessness invited disaster. So people created phrases to guard themselves, little verbal shields meant to keep danger at bay. You repeat them because your ancestors whispered them every day, hoping the right syllables might keep the world from tilting too far. The explanation sinks into you slowly, like warm broth on a cold night. You start noticing these word rituals everywhere you look. A young man misplaces a tool and mutters a protective phrase to ward off ill fortune. An elder corrects a child's clumsy declaration, gently swapping their phrasing with one that feels sturdier. Even laughter seems to trigger certain expressions, as if humor itself tempts fate and must be balanced with a charm to avoid offending unseen forces. The hall becomes a symphony of murmurs, old magic wrapped in casual tone. You think of your own habits without meaning to, the way you say certain things automatically, the little verbal flickers that leap out when something startles you, or when someone sneezes, or when you make a mistake and instinctively try to soften the consequence with a familiar phrase. You always assumed they were cultural quirks, harmless reflexes, filler, words that settle into your bones because everyone around you uses them. But now, sitting among people who lived by spells disguised as speech, you feel the ancient rhythm behind the modern reflex. A man beside you drops a ladle, catches it before it hits the ground, and breathes out a practiced phrase that sounds like relief, sharpened into tradition. Nobody laughs. Nobody teases him. Instead, they nod, satisfied he has reset the balance. To them, words are tools, shields, tiny storms of meaning that ripple beyond the speaker. You begin to understand why their language had such bite, why sagas carried weight, why even insults were crafted like weaponry. Later, as the fire dims and the hall quiets, the elder woman with the iron-gray braid sits beside you. She tells you stories of charms once spoken before voyages, before battles, before sleep. She describes phrases used to confuse spirits, distract trolls, or persuade the gods to glance kindly in one's direction. She laughs softly as she admits many people no longer remember the full spells, only the fragments endure, reshaped by time into simple sayings. But the core remains. Words still carry intention. Intention still shapes outcome. As she speaks, you feel something shift inside you, a recognition blooming in your chest. You say these fragments too, not the same ones, but descendants of them. You speak tiny spells without knowing they were spells. You mutter protections without knowing they once guarded entire families through fragile winters. You lace your daily speech with shadows of old magic, not because you believe in it, but because someone long before you did. When you finally step outside into the crisp night air, you breathe out and watch the words you did not say curl into the wind like invisible charms. The stars overhead seem to hang a little lower, the sky stretched wide and bright, and you understand with sudden clarity that your voice carries more history than you realized. You are not simply speaking, you are echoing the magic that kept your ancestors alive. You learn early that Viking laughter is not gentle, it is not delicate, it does not flutter politely through the air like a well-behaved guest. It erupts, it ricochets, it rolls through the longhouse with the force of a boulder tumbling down a mountainside. And always, always, it carries an edge. You discover quickly that Viking humor is sharpened like a blade, polished with affection, and swung with such casual precision that strangers might mistake it for hostility. It is not. It is their way of surviving everything the icy world throws at them. You witness it first when a warrior stumbles while carrying a heavy pail of water. Instead of concerned gasps, the room erupts in teasing remarks so quick and cutting you blink in disbelief. Someone calls him slippery foot. Another says the gods must be teaching him humility. A third pats his shoulder with mock sympathy, offering the very advice he clearly does not need. The man grins through the onslaught, soaking it in as if every barb strengthens him rather than wounds him. You sense that here, humor is not merely entertainment, it is training. Then you hear the second rule, though no one states it outright. You do not mock someone unless you would defend them. You do not tease someone unless you value them. You do not aim sarcasm at someone you wish to hurt. In this hall, humor is an armor shared among friends, a ritual of resilience, a way to test someone's strength without spilling a drop of blood. If someone cannot handle a well-placed jab, how will they handle actual danger? If they can laugh at themselves, they are trustworthy. If they cannot, the longhouse grows very quiet around them. You begin to notice it in every interaction. A hunter returns empty-handed, and someone points at the sky, asking if he tried. Negotiating with the birds instead. A woman burns a pot of stew, and her sister praises her ability to summon smoke spirits faster than any priest. A child trips, and instead of coddling him, the adults applaud his dramatic flair, insisting the fall looked intentional. The boy beams with pride. The sting fades instantly. In this world, humor repairs pride as quickly as it wounds it. What surprises you most is how deliberate it all feels. Sarcasm is not random here. It has rules, boundaries, and a rhythm older than the sagas. You do not punch downward. You do not mock someone in genuine distress. You never use humor to isolate. You use it to bind people closer, to soften hardship, to brighten nights when the wind claws against the walls. You see it clearly when a man sits silently after receiving bad news. No one teases him. No one cracks a joke. Instead, they sit near him, offering quiet presence. Only when he lifts his head and signals he is ready do the jabs return. Gentle at first, then bolder, each one pulling him back toward the living world. You feel something strange stir inside you. Recognition. You think of the way you tease your closest friends, the quick banter that flows faster when you feel safe. You think of how sarcasm slips easily into conversations, not because you are cold, but because humor softens truth. You think of how you use jokes to cope with stress, to keep panic at bay, to turn sharp moments into manageable ones. You realize that what you always thought of as modern personality might actually be ancient survival logic dressed in contemporary language. Later that night, someone challenges you with playful banter, testing your reflexes. You reply with a quick comment of your own, something lightly pointed but harmless. Table erupts with approval. A woman slaps your back so hard your vision blurs. Another raises her cup toward you with a grin sharp enough to slice rope. You passed. You are now part of the verbal battlefield that keeps everyone here sharp and sane. You lean back, warmth spreading through you, laughter rolling like thunder around the hall. The humor feels rough, but honest, sharp, but safe. You understand now why sarcasm clings to you in the modern world. It is not pettiness. It is not cynicism. It is armor forged in longhouses where people needed laughter to keep the darkness from creeping in. You sip your drink, listening to another round of jabs fly across the table. You realize you are hearing the ancestor of your own voice. You notice it one evening when the longhouse fills with the low rumble of voices, the kind that warns you something important is happening beneath the surface. Two men sit across from each other, both a little too quiet, both a little too still, both pretending to enjoy their stew while sending glances sharp enough to trim kindling. You brace yourself, expecting a dramatic outburst, a flying cup, perhaps an axe thrown with artistic flair. Instead, something else unfolds, something far stranger. No one confronts anyone directly. The tension diffuses sideways, like water finding new paths through stone. A woman at the far end of the table suddenly begins praising one man's strength in an exaggerated tone, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Another joins in, complimenting the other man's skill with a bow in a way that is just slightly too enthusiastic. Everyone else contributes in their own peculiar fashion, weaving a net of polite commentary so thick it becomes impossible for conflict to break through it. The two men shift uncomfortably, their irritation dissolving under the collective spotlight. By the time the stew is gone, they are reluctantly smiling, their anger filed down to a harmless edge. You realize this is not an accident. It is strategy. Vikings may be known for battles and fire and heroic chaos, but most of the time, they avoid direct confrontation with the precision of diplomats. In a small community trapped between sea, forest, and unpredictable weather, conflict is a dangerous luxury. One feud can unravel the fragile cooperation keeping the settlement alive. So instead of shouting, they nudge. Instead of accusing, they imply. Instead of saying, "I am furious with you," they say, "You seem troubled, friend," and then proceed to fix the problem without naming it. You watch the method repeat again and again like a subtle dance. A man who feels slighted does not storm across the hall. He tells a story instead, one with a moral so pointed it could serve as a spear. The person who wronged him listens, nodding at all the right moments, both of them pretending this is absolutely not about them, even as the entire hall subtly leans in. A woman upset with her sister does not scold her. She moves her belongings closer to someone else, a quiet declaration that ripples through the longhouse until the sister hurries over to apologize. Even children follow the pattern, offering pointed compliments when someone is being difficult. Nudging behavior with the finesse of tiny social tacticians. You begin to understand that this rule is not about politeness, it is about survival. These people cannot afford grudges. Winter is too long, resources are too scarce, enemies outside the settlement are too real. Harmony must be preserved, even when tempers flare. Indirectness becomes a tool, a shield against escalation, a way to redirect storms rather than meet them head on. And suddenly, your own life clicks into place with startling clarity. You think of the way you hint at issues instead of declaring them, how you soften criticism with jokes, how you say, "It's fine," when you mean something far more complicated, how you try to keep the peace even when confrontation might resolve things faster. You thought it was personality. Turns out it is ancestry, whispering through your habits, guiding your tone, shaping your instincts long after the longhouse has vanished. Later, as the fire dims and the hall quiets, the two men from earlier sit side by side, drinking together as if the earlier tension never existed. One claps the other on the back, the conflict dissolved without ever being named, absorbed into the fabric of communal care. The settlement breathes easier. You feel the lesson settle into you, warm and inevitable. Not all battles require weapons. Not all anger needs a name. Sometimes the safest way to resolve conflict is sideways, through stories, through nudges, through collective pressure that reminds everyone of what truly matters. You step outside, into the cold night, thinking of the subtle dances you perform in your own world, unaware of their ancient roots. You are not avoiding conflict. You are practicing the oldest social magic the Vikings ever mastered. You learn the weight of borrowing the moment you reach for a tool that is not yours. It is a simple thing, a wooden-handled knife resting beside a pile of chopped kindling, abandoned only for a heartbeat. You pick it up without thinking, planning to help the man beside you tidy the firewood. But before your fingers fully curl around the handle, three heads turn toward you with identical expressions, a blend of curiosity, caution, and the faint hope that you know what you are doing. You do not. Not yet. The owner of the knife steps forward, not angry, not even stern, but attentive in a way that makes your skin warm. He places his hand gently over yours, signaling a pause. Then he nods once, the smallest gesture of permission, and suddenly the entire hall relaxes. You did not borrow a kingdom, yet the reaction makes you feel as though you came dangerously close. You realize Vikings have an entire unspoken system for borrowing items, a social architecture built with more care than their longboats. Tools here are not just objects. They are extensions of a person's skill, pride, and survival. A knife is not merely a blade. A hammer is not merely a hammer. These things are carved, crafted, and maintained with hours of labor, often decorated, sometimes blessed, sometimes passed down through generations. Borrowing one without asking is like stepping into someone's personal history and rearranging the furniture. You spend the next few days watching people handle each other's belongings, and the more you observe, the clearer the pattern becomes. Borrowing is always formal, even when it seems casual. A hunter asks to use a bow with a tone that resembles a request for blessing. A woman lending her spindle offers it with a short speech about how it belonged to her grandmother, and the borrower receives it with the seriousness of someone accepting a sacred relic. When a young man lends his drinking horn to a visitor, a cheer rises through the hall because it signals trust deep enough to feel like an alliance. You begin to see how borrowing carries meaning far beyond the object itself. It signals honor, mutual respect, and accountability. The moment you borrow something, you are bound to return it in the same or better condition. You are responsible not just for the item, but for the relationship wrapped around it. If you damage it, you owe compensation. If you lose it, you owe something greater. People here treat borrowed items with a reverence usually reserved for small gods. And slowly, a realization creeps into your mind like cold air seeping under a door. You do the same thing. You think about how you hesitate before lending your favorite pen, your tools, your books, your bits of technology. You think about how you feel strangely honored when someone trusts you with something delicate or treasured. You think of the guilt that rises if you return something late or in worse shape than you received it. You thought these feelings were modern quirks, but now you see their ancient skeleton. Borrowing is a bond, always has been. One afternoon, you watch a small exchange that crystallizes everything. A young woman asks her mother for a simple wooden comb. The mother hands it over with a firm reminder to return it before nightfall. The girl grins, promises she will, and runs out the door. Hours later she returns, comb gleaming, wiped clean, handed back with both hands. Her mother nods, satisfied. The exchange lasted seconds, but the trust traveled centuries. You think of your own careful habits, how you say, "I'll take good care of it," and mean it, how you wipe down borrowed things before returning them, how you feel a quiet sense of responsibility settle in your chest. These instincts did not appear out of nowhere. They were carved into your lineage long before you were born, passed down through lives where tools meant survival and sharing meant risking or earning something profound. Later that evening, when someone offers you a knife to cut your portion of meat, you accept it with both hands, feeling its weight anchor you to something ancient. You thank the owner. He nods with that same subtle approval you have seen a dozen times now. You hold the knife carefully, aware of every motion, every slice, every gesture. You understand now what it carries. It is not just metal and wood, it is trust. Shaped by 1,000 winters, you learn the rule not through words but through instinct. The moment you place one log too many onto the fire, the longhouse glows bright. For a heartbeat, flames curling higher than necessary, and suddenly every Viking within 10 paces turns their head in perfect synchronized disbelief. Their expressions are not angry, but deeply concerned, as if you have just attempted to sacrifice half the roof for dramatic effect. A woman strides over, plucks the extra log from the flames with practiced ease, and tosses you a look that politely communicates, fire is not a toy, and you are dangerously close to treating it like one. You sit back, feeling heat rise to your cheeks, and begin watching the hearth more closely. It is the center of the hall, the quiet monarch around which daily life spins. People tend it the way others would tend a sacred animal. Every ember is nudged with intention. Every stick of wood is placed with the care of someone counting blessings. When sparks fly too freely, someone snaps a command, and the fire settles obediently, as if chastened. The Vikings treat fire as a living thing, and you realize quickly that the rule is simple. Do not waste it. Do not neglect it. Do not let it die. It makes sense once you see the world outside. The cold reaches through the cracks in the longhouse like a wan, hungry spirit, sharp enough to make your bones feel transparent. Fire is not comfort here. It is survival. The kind of survival that demands teamwork and vigilance. Stoking too much heat wastes precious wood. Letting the flames dwindle invites sickness, frostbite, and nights that stretch far longer than they should. Every spark is accounted for because each one can tip the balance between life and danger. As the evening stretches on, you notice smaller rituals. Someone passes by the fire and taps a log inward with their foot, barely glancing down. Another adds a fragment of dried moss, coaxing the flames just enough to keep them steady. A third person adjusts the cooking pot ever so slightly to make sure heat is not wasted on empty air. Children learn early to respect the hearth, and any who forget are quickly reminded by elders who seem to materialize from shadows with stern whispers and quicker hands. You realize the rule is not merely about resource management, it is about gratitude. Fire is too precious to take for granted, too unpredictable to leave alone, too powerful to treat casually. It becomes a companion, a guardian, a fragile miracle in the heart of winter. Wasting fire would feel like disrespect, like rejecting a gift the gods themselves fought to grant humanity. As you sit there, watching the flames rise and fall, something inside you stirs with recognition. You think of your own world, where you hover over thermostats like a protective dragon, where you turn lights off before leaving a room, not because someone threatened you with a lecture, but because something deep inside insists it is the right thing to do. You think of how you blow out candles carefully, how you linger near campfires, how you feel a strange sadness when a flame dies. You always assumed it was preference, but now you see the lineage. You are inheriting an ancient urgency. Later, when the night grows heavy, the chieftain walks by the hearth, checking it the same way you might check locks before bed. He adds only a small piece of wood, no more than necessary. He nods to himself. The fire settles into a steady glow, enough to warm the sleepers without wasting the next day's supply. Everyone exhales as if reassured. The room darkens, but the hearth stays bright enough to promise safety. You wrap yourself in a fur and lie down, watching the flames flicker against the rafters. You understand now why the Vikings built their lives around fire, and why the rule against wasting it carved itself into memory so deep it still echoes in your everyday habits. You do not waste warmth. You protect it, honor it, ration it, and feel its importance long after the cold is gone. You first notice it when you return to the longhouse after a walk along the frozen shoreline. A man spots you approaching, and instead of offering a simple hello, he stands tall, nods once, and waits. You pause, unsure what he expects, but instinct takes over. You nod, back. Only then does his face crack into a grin, and he strides forward as if you have passed some invisible test. The exchange feels oddly familiar, a greeting you have done 1,000 times without understanding its origin. Here, it carries a gravity that makes your breath slow. Inside, the rule becomes unmistakable. Every greeting follows a pattern. Eye contact first, firm and searching. A nod or slight bow of the head, then a verbal acknowledgement. The order never changes. Children do it. Elders do it. Even the half-asleep warrior leaning against a post does it, blinking groggily but still lifting his chin in recognition before mumbling a greeting. You watch these interactions unfold like a ritual dance, each movement shaped by something older than memory. You finally ask a woman near the hearth why greetings follow this pattern, and she seems surprised that you need clarification. She explains that long ago, when travel was dangerous and strangers unpredictable, the first seconds of an encounter mattered. People learned to read intention in stillness, in posture, in how someone acknowledged another's presence. A greeting was not about friendliness. It was about safety. Eye contact meant awareness. The nod meant peace. The words meant permission to approach. Skip a step, and you risked being mistaken for someone with ill intent. The more you observe, the clearer the purpose becomes. A warrior returning from a hunt does not rush into conversation. He pauses at the entrance, scanning the room for a face to meet. Only when someone nods does he step inside fully. A woman carrying firewood greets two men with a quick lift of her chin and they instantly shift aside to let her pass, their acknowledgement smoothing the way. Even animals seem included. A dog wanders in and receives a greeting nod from an elder, who mutters a phrase that sounds like an ancient courtesy. The dog wags its tail, satisfied. You feel the rule settle under your skin like a memory waking up. You think about your own greetings, how you instinctively nod at people you pass, how you lift your eyebrows slightly, as if signaling peaceful intent, how you offer a quiet hello only after making sure you have been noticed. You never questioned these habits, but here, surrounded by the people who shaped them, you recognize the blueprint. Later, two men approach each other, with clear tension in their shoulders, and the entire hall watches closely. Conflict hangs between them like a thick fog. Yet even now, the rule holds. They stop, meet each other's gaze, nod. Only then do they speak, the greeting becoming a bridge that prevents tempers from igniting too quickly. You marvel at how a simple gesture contains centuries of wisdom, the kind that could prevent bloodshed. As the night deepens, greetings grow warmer. People returning from outside wave to each other, but the nod remains. People settling near the fire greet their neighbors with it. People shifting places give a quick dip of the head as acknowledgement. The ritual becomes a tide, constant and grounding. Every interaction begins with the same shared promise. I see you. I mean no harm. We begin from peace. You take a seat along the wall, absorbing the rhythm of it all. The fire crackles, voices rise and fall. Snow taps against the wooden planks. Someone approaches and gives you a small nod. Without thinking, you return it, feeling a warmth bloom beneath your ribs. The greeting connects you to the room in a way words alone never could. When you step outside later, the cold air bites at your cheeks. A woman passes by on her way toward the shoreline and gives you the simple greeting you now know by heart. You nod back, feeling the ancient weight of the gesture settle comfortably into your chest. It feels right, natural, timeless. You understand now that you never greet someone casually. You are living out one of the oldest rules the Vikings carved into human behavior. You do not think about your hands at first. They hang at your sides, numb from the cold, stiff from the wind that slices across the settlement like a blade too eager for purpose. You walk toward a group of Vikings gathered near the longhouse entrance, expecting the usual booming greetings and the whirlwind of questions about where you have been and whether you froze any essential parts of yourself. Instead, something quieter happens. A man steps forward, extends his hand, palm open, fingers relaxed, and waits. The gesture feels familiar in a way that snags at something deep in you. You reach out automatically, gripping his hand in yours, and the moment your fingers close, you feel an unspoken exchange pass between you, a confirmation, a check, a silent understanding. No weapon, no trick, no danger. Only when the man releases your hand does he grin, thump your shoulder, and usher you inside. Satisfied you mean peace. You watch the ritual repeat throughout the day. Warriors returning from patrol clasp hands forearm to forearm, gripping tight enough to make bones creak. Hunters greet. Elders, with a gentler version, palms meeting in a show of honesty. Even children mimic the gesture with their tiny fists, laughing as they do it, unaware they are reenacting 1,000 years of survival instincts. You finally ask someone why this matters so much, and the answer comes with a snort of disbelief. Hidden blades, they say, as though the meaning should be carved into your bones already. In the old days, when feuds simmered and alliances shifted with every season, a greeting was not simply courtesy. It was a test. A stranger's hand could hide a knife. An enemy could pretend to be a friend. A dishonest man might strike before his name was even spoken. So people learned to offer their empty palm first, a gesture that exposed the wrist, the fingers, the lack of concealed steel. Trust began in the hands. As you walk through the longhouse, the truth of this becomes impossible to ignore. Vikings carry blades as casually as you carry keys. Knives hang from belts, from boots, from sleeves, tucked into places sharp enough to make your modern instincts nervous. In a world where steel decides fate faster than speech, showing your bare hand first is a promise stronger than any oath. A man tells you stories of ancient meetings between rival clans, where greetings happen slowly, carefully, under watchful eyes. Hands extended, palms displayed, fingers curled only after the other person proved they were unarmed. A handshake allowed each person to feel the other's grip, their strength, their presence. It also meant no one could draw a weapon quickly without being stopped. The handshake was not friendly at first. It was defensive, practical, survival wrapped in civility. But then, something unexpected happened. The gesture lingered, even when peace came, even when feuds cooled, even when blades remained sheathed for years. The handshake turned from caution into connection. The grip softened, the pressure turned from testing to greeting. Yet the meaning never fully faded. You still feel it now when you shake someone's hand in your own world, a quick meeting of palms that silently checks for honesty before it allows warmth. You think about the times you have shaken hands without noticing the instinct humming beneath the motion. The way people clasp each other firmly as if weighing character in 3 seconds. The way you judge someone by how sincerely they return the gesture. The way you sense sincerity or deceit, not from words, but from the pressure of their hand. You always thought this was modern social etiquette. Now you see the truth. You inherited a warrior's greeting. Later that night, as the hall quiets and the fire softens to embers, a woman extends her hand before sitting beside you. Not out of fear, but out of custom. You grip her hand, exchange that ancient spark of trust, and the two of you settle in peacefully. In the flickering light, you understand something deeper. You shake hands because once, long ago, someone feared a blade hidden in the dark, and the gesture survived longer than the danger ever did. You notice the drinking rules before anyone bothers explaining them, partly because violating one nearly earns you a spear of concern from 3 different directions. It happens when you take a sip from your cup too casually, lifting it without waiting for the man beside you to raise his own. His eyes widen. The woman across from you pauses, mid-laugh. A warrior halfway across the longhouse freezes with his horn halfway to his lips, like someone stopped time with an annoyed whisper. You lower your cup, slowly, realizing you have unknowingly wandered into sacred territory. A moment later, a broad hand claps your shoulder, firm but friendly, and a man with a beard thick enough to constitute a household pet explains the rule in a tone halfway between a lecture and gentle amusement. You drink when others drink. You wait when others wait. You never, under any circumstance, leave someone drinking alone unless illness or death provides a reasonable excuse. To drink without the group is to step out of the circle, to refuse the bond the Vikings consider essential. You begin watching more carefully. It resembles choreography, the way cups rise and fall in unison, the way people pause to acknowledge each other before taking a sip, the way even rowdy men restrain themselves until the rhythm is right. Drinking here is not a mindless activity. It is ceremony. It is community. Each sip is a tiny pact. You learn another rule when a young man tries to refill his own horn. A sharp gasp bursts from the table, and an elder swiftly intercepts him, taking the vessel and filling it herself. Refilling your own drink is not simply rude. It is a declaration that you lack faith in your companions. Your community fills your cup. Your community watches your back. The moment you do it yourself, you shatter the trust that keeps this place alive. And there is more, much more. You notice that any time someone lifts a cup in salute, the entire longhouse waits. Not just the people nearby, everyone. A toast here has weight, thick as the winter air, and twice as serious. The speaker might praise a friend, honor an ancestor, or insult an enemy with poetic flair. Whatever they choose, the words anchor themselves in the room until the end of the toast releases everyone to drink. Even children sit still, eyes bright, learning the gravity of shared ritual. It becomes impossible not to compare these moments to your own life. You think of clinking glasses at dinner tables, of waiting for everyone to be served before drinking, of raising a toast even during small celebrations. You once thought these habits were simple politeness. Now you sense the ancient bones beneath them. You feel the weight of people who learned that drinking together forged loyalty stronger than any contract. One night, the longhouse bursts into celebration. A trader has returned with news from distant shores, and the entire settlement gathers to feast. Drinking horns pass from hand to hand, each person offering a few words before taking their turn. You see how the rules operate in full force. No one drinks out of time. No one is left unattended. No one is ignored. A single person drinking alone would feel like a wound in the rhythm. Another rule surfaces when someone challenges a boast. The man who bragged must drink again to prove he stands by his words. If his courage falters, his opponent declines to drink, signaling that the boast was hollow. The hall erupts in laughter or cheers depending on the outcome. Even pride is measured in sips. You take your place among them, cup in hand, feeling the beat of the fire and the pulse of ancient custom all around you. A woman beside you nods in encouragement, making sure you understand when to drink and when to wait. Her guidance feels like being invited into a thread of history woven through countless feasts. When the moment comes, when the table raises their cups together, you follow suit. You feel the warmth of the drink, the heat of the flames, and the belonging that settles into your chest like a steady glow. You realize that every toast you have ever given, every clink of glasses, every shared sip among friends carries echoes of nights like this. You are not simply being polite. You are honoring a 1,000-year-old code. You notice it the moment you step outside into the morning cold, wrapped in a borrowed cloak thick enough to double as a temporary shelter. The Vikings around you move with purpose, their clothes layered, tied, wrapped, fastened, and reinforced in ways that seem less like fashion choices and more like battle strategies. You expected crude hides and simple wool. Instead, you find a world of deliberate design where every strap, clasp, and thread carries centuries of meaning and necessity. You watch a woman fasten her cloak with a brooch the size of your palm, its metal gleaming despite the frost. She adjusts it twice, not out of vanity, but to ensure the wind hits. Peek her from an angle that keeps warmth trapped beneath the fabric. A man beside her wraps a belt around his tunic, pulling it tight enough to create folds that can hold tools, knives, bits of food, or anything else he might need. Nothing they wear is random. Everything is chosen to outsmart the weather, the terrain, and the unpredictable mischief of daily life. You begin to see habits you recognize. A woman ties her boots with a double knot, tugging the laces to test their strength. A warrior rolls his sleeves before lifting crates, not merely for ease of movement, but to avoid soaking the fabric on the snow. Children tug their woolen caps down over their ears with a practiced motion, utterly unaware they are reenacting actions older than their entire bloodline. There is comfort in repetition here. As if clothing is both shield and ritual, you notice how they layer. Not too much, not too little. A thin underrobe to wick away sweat during work, a thicker tunic for warmth, a cloak for the final barrier against the cold. The balance is an art, learned through bitter winters and wisdom passed from mother to child. You begin layering your own clothes more carefully, sensing their to approval each time you choose warmth over stubbornness. Then, someone shows you the rule that surprises you the most. Vikings seldom leave the house without something strapped, fastened, or tied around their waist. A belt is not merely a belt. It is a tool rack, a symbol of readiness, a statement that you are prepared to contribute to the world outside. A person without a belt looks unfinished, almost vulnerable. You feel it when you try walking across the settlement beltless. People glance at you with faint confusion, as if waiting for you to realize you forgot a part of yourself. Clothing becomes identity here. Warriors wear heavy cloaks and metal accents, not to appear threatening, but because those things signal responsibility. Fishermen wear shorter tunics, so nothing catches when hauling nets. Children wear bright scraps, so they can be spotted quickly during winter play. A practical choice wrapped in cheer. Even hairstyles matter. Braids are not random decoration. They keep hair from tangling in tools, weapons, and firewood bundles. You feel a flicker of recognition as you watch them. You think of how you tie a scarf tightly on cold days, how you tuck your hands into your sleeves, how you instinctively check your pockets before leaving home. You think of the little rituals that shape your mornings, straightening your collar, tightening your belt, tugging your coat closed, tying your shoes with that exact familiar motion. You thought these were modern habits, small comforts, pieces of routine shaped by convenience. But here, among the Vikings, you see their bones. Later that evening, a woman helps you adjust your cloak, pulling it tighter across your chest, fastening the brooch slightly off-center so it sits securely. She steps back, nodding in approval, and you feel unexpectedly grounded. The cloak is warm, heavy, protective. You feel ready in a way you never quite feel in your own world's lighter clothing. By the fire, you watch others settle down, unwinding layers with practiced ease, folding garments carefully so they do not lose their shape. Clothing is treated with a reverence that speaks of survival. Each item is precious, hand-woven, hand-dyed, hand-repaired a dozen times. Throwing something away is unthinkable. Mending is expected. Care is a daily act. You remember the way you keep favorite sweaters longer than makes. Scents, how you patch old jackets, how you feel guilty when something wears out. It is not thriftiness, it is inheritance. As the firelight softens and the longhouse quiets, you wrap your cloak around yourself once more. It settles on your shoulders like a memory returning to its place. You realize you do not simply dress for comfort or style. You dress like someone whose ancestors battled winter with wool, leather, and stubborn brilliance. You first sense it during a feast, when the longhouse hums with voices, laughter, clatter, and the rhythmic thump of boots shifting across the wooden floor. The noise folds around you like a thick blanket, warm and lively, a shield against the cold outside. But then something unexpected happens. A story ends. A bowl is passed one moment too slowly, and the entire hall falls silent for just a breath. A single breath is all it takes. The shift is immediate. People straighten. Eyes flick around. Someone clears their throat with the urgency of a man trying to scare off a lurking spirit. A woman jumps in with a joke that barely makes sense, but it does not matter. The silence breaks. The hall exhales. Life resumes. That is when you realize it. Vikings fear silence. Not dislike it. Not find it awkward. Fear it. And soon, you understand why. Silence in this world is not peaceful. It is not contemplative. It is not a pleasant break between lively moments. Silence is danger. Silence means the wind has changed, or a watchman has spotted something, or animals have gone still outside, or the gods are listening too closely. Silence means something is wrong. These people live in a land where storms crash against the settlement without warning, where enemies creep through forests like shadows with knives, where wild creatures prowl through the night. When the noise stops, you pay attention. When voices falter, you assume something approaches. When laughter dies too quickly, you prepare for whatever waits beyond the walls. So Vikings learned to chase silence away before it grows teeth. You begin noticing the rules they never speak aloud. If a lull falls over a conversation, someone fills it. Doesn't matter how. A story, an insult, a boast, even a loud, unnecessary cough. If someone is too quiet at dinner, their neighbor nudges them, forcing them into the rhythm again. Children are encouraged to chatter, to keep the air moving, to keep fear at bay. Even arguments serve a purpose. Raised voices mean life continues. Noise is proof that nothing terrible lurks outside. You feel the instinct settling under your skin, familiar in a way that unsettles you. You think back to your own world, the way you blurt something out when a room goes quiet, the way group conversations feel strange when they hit a pause, the way you feel a subtle panic when dinner tables fall silent for a few seconds too long. You always thought it was social anxiety, or habit, or discomfort with stillness. But here, surrounded by the ancestors of your instincts, you realize the truth. Your discomfort is inherited. Silence once meant danger for the people who shaped your habits. Your ancestors learned to fear the quiet because the quiet often preceded chaos. They survived by filling it. One evening, a sudden gust of wind slams. The shutters open, killing the conversation instantly. The hall freezes. For a heartbeat, silence reigns again, sharp and cold. Every Viking reaches for something, a tool, a ladle, a weapon, anything. Their eyes fix on the dark gap in the wall, the space where silence grew teeth again. Then the chieftain closes the shutter with a firm slam, announces it was only the wind, and just like that, noise explodes back into the room. Every person speaks at once, stories overlapping, laughter rising too loud to be natural. You realize they are drowning the silence before it can return. You take a sip of your drink, heart pounding even though nothing threatened you, and the realization hits deeper than you expected. You are not afraid of silence because silence is awkward. You are afraid of silence because once, long ago, silence carried danger on its back. The longhouse warms again. Voices rise. The world steadies, and you understand, with a clarity that feels like memory, why your heart speeds up whenever a room suddenly goes quiet. You notice it first when the fire cracks lazily in the center of the longhouse, and the evening starts to slope into that quiet space where bellies are, full and minds soften. The benches are packed, shoulders brushing, cloaks steaming from melted snow. Yet the entire room shifts the moment the storyteller rises. It is subtle, like a tide pulling everyone inward at once. You feel it tug at you too. Something ancient that you do not question until later. The storyteller lifts a hand, and the hall hushes, not out of fear but devotion. Warriors who spent the entire day chopping wood and yelling about whose ox is the ugliest now sit straighter than monks. A toddler stops mid-tantrum. Even the dogs settle. It is not magic. Not officially, though. It feels suspiciously close to it. Respecting storytellers is a rule here, one as old as the sagas themselves, woven into the rafters and hammered into the bones of anyone born north of the storms. You can sense it all around you. The storyteller holds more than tales. They hold memory. They hold warning. They hold the fragile thread connecting one generation to the next, because in a land where tomorrow often depends on a well-swung axe or a fortunate tide, stories are how you remember who you are. The rule is simple. When the storyteller speaks, you listen. You learn quickly that interrupting is not done lightly. Not because anyone would punish you, but because it would be like standing up in a temple and coughing loudly just to hear your own echo. It is unthinkable. The storyteller begins to speak, and the room folds around the words, pressing closer as though trying to keep them warm. These tales carry battle scars, lost loves, dead kings, and the kind of lessons people learned the hard way. They are reminders of what came before and warnings of what might come again. Everyone listens because missing even one detail feels like inviting misfortune. Still, the rule goes beyond reverence. It is also strategic. In a world without clocks, books, or a stable chance of living to a grand old age, storytellers are the keepers of survival manuals disguised as entertainment. They teach you how to travel, how to negotiate, how to avoid being stabbed by a cousin during a property dispute. Their stories carry truths people learned painfully. So you honor the speaker because the information is not free. It was paid for in danger. You watch the flicker of firelight across the storyteller's face as they describe a voyage through icy seas, walls of water lifting the patter, ship until the sky disappears, the gods watching with uncaring eyes. The hall leans in. Even you lean in. Something inside you recognizes the instinct. You have done this your whole life without knowing why. You sit quietly during movies. You shush your friends when someone tells a story around a table. You feel offended when a punchline is spoiled. You always thought it was politeness, or maybe irritation, but now you see the truth. Your brain still thinks stories are survival tools, not entertainment. The storyteller finishes a section of the saga and pauses. The silence that follows is not like the dreaded kind that hangs around danger. This silence is reverent, anchored, warm. Someone scoops more ale into a cup and hands it forward. Someone else nods in the rhythm that means continue. The storyteller takes a breath and dives back in, and you feel the story taking shape inside, in you, threading your own instincts to the ancient ones these people rely on. You realize you are part of the audience in the oldest performance tradition your ancestors ever knew. Every culture after this one will keep the rule, even if the world forgets where it came from. You still lower your voice when a speaker begins. You still gather around tales like they are fires. You still treat a good storyteller as someone who deserves the best seat, the most attention, the softest hush. The story ends. The hall erupts in cheers, and you do not clap. No one here does. Instead, they bang fists on tables, stomp their boots, shout approval loud enough to scare off ghosts. The storyteller bows only slightly, because too much pride invites trouble, but the glow in their eyes betrays how deeply the praise lands. It means their story will live another winter. As the crowd disperses, firelight dimming into embers, you feel the weight of the old rule settle in your bones. Respect the storyteller, because one day their tale may be the only thing standing between your people and the dark. And for the first time, you understand how true that still is. You do not think much about bedtime until the first night you actually try to sleep in the longhouse. You imagine something simple, maybe a quiet corner, a blanket, a sigh of relief. Instead, the entire building transforms around you as if someone has flipped a hidden switch labeled night mode, and suddenly every Viking is performing rituals so practiced and synchronized it feels like watching a flock of birds shift direction mid-flight. It begins with the fire. The flames are lowered with careful hands, never extinguished completely, only tamed until they glow like sleepy embers. A woman pokes the coals gently, shaping them into a mound that will burn slowly until dawn. You notice how she whispers something over them, not dramatic, not ceremonial, just soft enough to be a private exchange between caretaker and flame. You do not understand the words, but you understand the intention. Bedtime starts with safety. Then the settling begins. Warriors loosen their belts, boots thud against the floor, and cloaks are folded with the sort of precision usually reserved for precious relics. Children scamper to gather straw into nests near their parents. Even the dogs circle 3 times before collapsing with satisfied grunts. The longhouse fills with the quiet bustle of people transitioning from battle readiness to something gentler, a communal unwinding without a single wasted motion. And then comes the sound. Not quite humming, not quite prayer, but something in between. A low ripple of voices, soft and almost melodic, washing through the hall as everyone prepares for sleep. You recognize the cadence long before you understand the meaning. It is the same tone you use when you say goodnight without thinking, the same softness in your voice when you wish someone rest after a long day, the same instinct to speak calmly at the threshold between waking and dreaming. The Vikings call it night settling. You call it familiar. You watch as a mother tucks her child beneath a wool blanket, smoothing the fabric with repetitive motions that look almost identical to the way you adjust your own sheets. She pats the child's shoulder in a rhythm you have felt in your own life, the universal language of "you are safe now." The child relaxes instantly. Across the hall, a man braids his wife's hair loosely so it will not tangle during sleep. Another sharp reminder that bedtime here is a cooperative ritual, not an individual one. People help each other prepare. They share warmth, space, breath. They murmur soft jokes about who snores loudest, who thrashes like a stranded fish, who needs another layer of blankets before the frost finds them. Laughter settles the room even further. You feel a tug of recognition again. You think of the way you dim lights before bed, how you stack blankets, how you adjust pillows until they feel exactly right, how you check the door locks, the windows, the stove, not because you expect danger, but because some ancient part of you refuses to sleep until the world feels properly tucked in. You think of the quiet voice you use at night, the rituals you never questioned, the small gestures that signal to your body it is time to let your guard down. All of it echoes the Vikings preparing for sleep. As the hall calms, the final ritual appears. A man walks the perimeter, checking walls, tools, weapons, embers. His steps are steady, slow, deliberate. You watch him pass by your sleeping space and feel a strangely comforting sensation, as though someone has just double-checked the universe on your behalf. Only when he lies down does the room fully settle. You lie on your straw mattress wrapped in a heavy fur, listening to the soft breathing around you. The closeness should feel strange, but instead it feels grounding, as if the presence of others forms a shield around your dreams. The fire's glow pulses gently against the rafters. Someone sighs in their sleep. Someone else murmurs a half-formed word. Every sound feels like a thread woven into a blanket you did not know you were missing. You close your eyes, and the realization comes quietly, fitting for the hour. Your bedtime rituals are not modern comforts. They are inherited rhythms from longhouses like this, from nights when survival depended on shared warmth, from ancestors who understood that rest required intention, community, and the certainty that all was well enough to drift into the dark. You breathe deeply, letting the warmth pull you under. You sleep like someone remembering an old home. You do not set out to tidy anything. In fact, you decide quite confidently that tonight you will simply sit by the fire, eat your stew, and mind your own business. That plan lasts roughly 4 heartbeats, because as soon as you take your seat, you notice a stray wooden spoon lying abandoned on the floorboards. Then you notice a pile of wood chips scattered near the bench. Then your eyes land on a folded cloak slipping dangerously close to the edge of a stool, threatening to fall at any moment. Before you know it, you are reaching for the spoon, nudging the wood chips into a neat little pile, and tucking the cloak safely into place. When you finally look up, 3 Vikings are watching you with expressions that fall somewhere between respect and amusement. One gives you a nod that says you have done exactly what any reasonable person should. Another pats your shoulder as if to say, "Welcome to the unspoken system." It is then you realize something important. Vikings tidy shared spaces with the intensity of people who believe the gods themselves might judge their housekeeping. You watch them more closely as the evening unfolds. A warrior finishes sharpening his axe, and before setting it down, he brushes away the metal shavings with one swift sweep. A woman weaving near the fire gathers every stray thread into her hand, rolling them together to discard later. Children returning from play place their small wooden toys into a carved box by the door, without being told, without hesitating. Even the dogs behave in ways that suggest centuries of being scolded for dragging bones into the wrong corner. The longhouse is lived in, certainly. It is cluttered with life and activity and tools. but it is never chaotic, never neglected, never left to rot in its own mess. Everything has a place, and if something needs moving, every hand seems willing to do it. Over time, you learn why. In this world, shared spaces are not optional parts of life. They are the bones of survival. The longhouse is where people cook, eat, mend wounds, tell stories, sleep, store food, and make decisions that might determine whether the settlement lives through winter. If clutter gathers, it becomes a hazard. A misplaced tool can trip someone carrying boiling water. A half-eaten bone might attract animals. A badly stored cloak might ignite near the fire. The margin for error is thin, thinner than you ever realized. Tidiness here is not about cleanliness. It is about safety, respect, and cooperation. You begin to understand this instinct by watching how they react to disorder. No one complains. No one lectures. They simply fix, ticket the moment they see it. If a bench is out of place, someone nudges it back. If a pot sits crooked on the shelf, someone adjusts it. If ashes spill from the hearth, someone sweeps them up with a few quick strokes. The labor is constant, but shared, folded invisibly into daily life. The surprising part is how natural it feels to you. You think of all the times you have tidied a room that was not yours, straightened chairs in waiting areas, pushed grocery carts into a neater row, lined up shoes by the door at a friend's house. You think of how you feel a small, inexplicable itch when a shared space looks messy. You always assumed it meant you were too picky, or maybe battling a compulsion. Now you see the lineage behind the impulse. Your ancestors relied on communal order. They survived by respecting shared space. They kept danger at bay with tidiness that doubled as silent teamwork. You still carry those instincts in the modern world, where you are more likely to tidy a break room than a longhouse. But the bones of the habit are unmistakably old. One evening, after helping clear the remains of dinner, you sit near the fire and feel strangely content. The hall is calm. Now. Tools hang neatly. Blankets are folded. The air is warm, steady, unthreatening. The whole space feels like a collective exhale. A woman sits beside you and murmurs something about how good order makes good sleep. You find yourself agreeing without question. You settle into your bedding, aware of the quiet satisfaction humming through the longhouse, the sense that everything is where it should be, and therefore everyone can rest. You close your eyes with a soft realization. You do not tidy because you are particular. You tidy because people once depended on each other to keep danger from slipping silently into shared spaces. You notice it the first time the air shifts. Not dramatically, not with some grand announcement from the gods, but with a subtle change in the wind that brushes against your cheek like a warning or a promise. The Vikings notice it too. All of them, as if the entire settlement shares one finely tuned instinct. A woman stops mid-step and sniffs the air. A man pauses while splitting wood, leaning on his axe. Even the dogs lift their heads. Something has changed, something small yet enormous, and the whole world seems to hold a breath. Then the celebrating begins. Not loudly at first. A few murmurs, some nods exchanged, a quiet ripple of recognition passing through the longhouse. Someone says the snow smells different. Someone else claims the sunlight lasted a little longer today. The elders hoist themselves onto the best benches, not because their joints demand it, though they do, but because this is their moment. They hold the old memories, the old calendars, the quiet knowledge of when seasons shift and what that means for everyone. Within minutes, the longhouse transforms. People who were half asleep suddenly bustle with purpose. Wooden cups appear. Someone tosses herbs into the stew to make it worthy of the day, though you are not entirely sure what that means. Children begin weaving bits of dried grass together, while adults tie sprigs of greenery to doorposts, muttering words you cannot decipher, but sense are blessings, disguised as decoration. You ask what is happening, and a woman answers simply, the season has turned. She says it like announcing the birth of a child or the return of a long-lost friend. For Vikings, the seasons are not just divisions of the year. They are living forces that shape survival. A shift in the wind could mean new food, new danger, new travel routes, or the closing of old ones. So when the world tilts even slightly, they celebrate as if the earth itself has joined them at the table. You watch the rituals unfold. Someone drags a heavy log toward the hearth, declaring it the first log of the new season, and the entire hall reacts as though this is a deeply impressive achievement. People adorn themselves with bits of nature, a feather tucked behind an ear, a piece of bark carved into a charm, a flower braided into a beard with surprising elegance. Even the stoic warriors wear small tokens as if they secretly enjoy the excuse. Food changes too. The stew gets thicker or lighter depending on which season arrives. A special bread appears, dense and hearty, because apparently seasons require carbohydrates. People open old jars of preserved berries saved for moments like this, the taste so sharp and bright you understand instantly why they waited. As the longhouse fills with color, warmth, and the clatter of quick hands preparing offerings for the celebration, you feel a spark of recognition curl through you. You do things like this too. You celebrate the first warm day after winter with surprising enthusiasm, shedding layers as if you survived a historic trial. You savor the first chilly evening by making something warm to drink, lighting candles, or pulling out soft blankets from storage. You decorate your home when seasons shift, even if you do not call it ritual. You feel a strange excitement when leaves change color, when spring breezes smell new, when the sun behaves differently than it did yesterday. You have always felt these changes deeply, but never questioned why. Now you understand. Your ancestors needed to notice the seasons. Their lives depended on it. They celebrated because celebrating was how they adapted, how they honored the world's rhythms, how they prepared themselves for whatever came next. That instinct never left you. It simply changed clothes, disguising itself as modern habits with ancient bones. As the evening grows louder, the Vikings sing, laugh, and pass cups around the table. A warrior insists you eat a second bowl of stew because the new season demands fullness. Someone else thrusts a garland of dried flowers onto your head before you can protest. You accept all of it, feeling caught in a tide older than any map. Later, when the fire settles into a warm glow and the songs fade into soft humming, you step outside into the cold night. The air feels different, sharper, cleaner, charged with possibility. You look up at the sky, stars winking like distant fires, and the realization settles quietly into your chest. You celebrate seasonal shifts, not because it is tradition. You celebrate them because the world has always whispered to your blood, and you still listen. You begin noticing the pattern long before anyone explains it to you. It starts with the chieftain's posture, not towering above everyone on some ornate platform, not barking orders like an impatient storm spirit, but seated at the center of the hall where the heat from the fire can reach him and where every conversation naturally flows. People approach him often, not hesitantly, but with the comfort of those who expect to be heard. He listens the way a seasoned sailor reads, shifting waves, patient and alert, nodding slowly as each voice shapes the air around him. You realize with a jolt that this is not the leadership you imagined. It is something quieter, steadier, sharper. You watch how decisions are made, not by decree, but by discussion, by the slow accumulation of voices around the fire, until the chieftain sifts through them like a smith sorting iron from slag. A warrior speaks about the hunt. A farmer weighs in on livestock. A grandmother complains about the smoke in the hall. And somehow, her opinion carries the weight of a full council. The chieftain does not demand silence. He presides over the noise, guiding it gently back into coherence whenever it frays. When he finally speaks, the hall leans forward together, not because they fear him, but because they trust him to make sense of the tangled threads. Then you notice the second rule, one hidden in plain sight. Leaders here do not distance themselves from labor. The chieftain splits wood. The elders mend nets. Even the most respected warriors take their turn cleaning ash from the hearth. No one is exempt. No one floats above the grind of daily survival. Authority is proven through participation. A leader who does not work is not truly leading. You spot the chieftain hauling a water bucket with the quiet determination of someone who knows the settlement, watches how he lifts it, not because it is heavy, but because leadership is a performance of shared burden. And something clicks inside you. You recognize the way you respect leaders who work alongside you, the managers who do not hide in offices but show up beside you during chaos. You recognize the irritation you feel toward leaders who demand effort but never contribute it. These instincts did not appear randomly. They were carved into those before you by winters that did not forgive ego. You observe more closely. Whenever tension rises, the chieftain acknowledges it openly, not letting it fester beneath the wooden beams. He encourages people to speak grievances before they sour into danger. Even disagreements follow a rhythm. Two warriors argue about a hunting route, and instead of escalating into a brawl, the chieftain steps between them with the calm neutrality of someone who has broken up this argument every season. He redirects them to the community's needs, not their pride. They grumble, but they yield because the settlement depends on unity, not ego. Another realization creeps into you like warm light through morning fog. You have seen this dynamic before. Team meetings where everyone contributes a small part. Brainstorms where ideas are thrown into a shared fire and reshaped together. Leaders who diffuse conflict by shifting the focus back to the group's purpose. Workplace rituals that feel oddly ancient, as if your job is a longhouse disguised as an office. Later in the day, you witness the chieftain sharing news with the hall. He does not hide the hard parts. He lays them out plainly, letting everyone absorb the consequences. Vikings value transparency because secrets breed fear, and fear fractures survival. You think of how you crave clear communication from leaders, how silence at work breeds distrust, how honesty anchors groups. These behaviors feel modern, but now you see their roots in a firelit hall where survival depended on every person knowing what storms approached. As evening settles, you notice the final rule. Leaders here are not chosen solely for strength or lineage, but for their ability to hold the hall together, to mediate, to balance, to weigh choices with a mind sharpened by empathy as much as experience. Leadership is not domination, it is stewardship. The chieftain sits beside a young hunter who failed to bring back game and speaks to him, quietly, offering guidance without humiliation. He praises effort publicly, corrects errors privately, and celebrates victories as if they belong to everyone. The hall thrives under his steadiness. You feel a strange warmth as you watch him, because you recognize what good leadership feels like. Not because modern society taught you, but because someone long before you learned these lessons under the same flickering firelight and carried them through generations until they reached you. As the hall quiets for the night, you lie down with the soft understanding that your instincts about leadership are older than any workplace handbook. You lead and follow in patterns shaped by people who survived through shared strength, not hierarchy. And without realizing it, you have been living their wisdom all along. You learn about communal responsibility slowly at first, almost by accident, the way you learn most ancient instincts you did not know you inherited. It begins when you see a young boy struggling to drag a heavy basket of fish across the longhouse floor. Before you can even rise to help him, 3 people have already stepped in. One lifts the back of the basket. Another steadies the front. A third tells the boy he is doing well but should take shorter steps next time. The boy beams with pride, not embarrassment. He is part of something larger, and he knows it. You are still processing this scene when a woman stirs the cooking pot over the hearth. She tastes it, frowns, and passes the spoon to a man beside her. He tastes it too, nods, and adds a pinch of herbs. One pot, many hands, no hesitation. Moments later, two children begin gathering stray firewood to replenish the pile. No one told them to. They simply notice the need, and acting on it seems as reflexive as breathing. At first, you assume these moments are coincidences, that Vikings just happen to be unusually helpful. But as the days unfold, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Work is not assigned, it is absorbed. Tasks are not owned. They are shared. If someone starts repairing a broken stool, another person joins them without being asked. If someone sweeps ash from the floor, others adjust benches to make room. If someone struggles with a stubborn door hinge, 3 people appear with advice that may or may not be useful, but the intention is solid. The longhouse is held together by a constant current of quiet cooperation, and you begin to feel the tug of it whenever you notice something out of place. You remember the modern phrase, "someone else will handle it," and realize that here, such a thought would sound absurd. If you can help, you do. If you see something that needs doing, you step in. If a problem belongs to the group, then so does the solution. You start pitching in more, thinking it might make you blend in, but the truth is simpler. Helping feels natural here, comfortable, as if a door in your mind has quietly swung open. When someone drops a ladle, you pick it up. When you see a man struggling to carry a heavy beam, you grab the other end before he has time to protest. Every time you help, someone nods in approval. Not dramatically, but in that understated Viking way that carries surprising warmth. One evening, a snowstorm pounds the walls with the force of an angry spirit, and the wind howls through the cracks. The whole settlement works together to secure shutters, reinforce beams, and move sleeping spaces away from weaker walls. You find yourself hauling blankets, checking on children, carrying firewood, doing it all without thinking. No one gives orders. No one waits to be told. The entire hall moves like a single living creature, every limb aware of the others. And it is then, in the chaos of cold air and rushing footsteps, that the rule becomes completely clear. In this world, your survival depends on everyone else, which means their survival depends on you. You think of how many times in your own life you have stepped around a mess in a shared kitchen, ignored a nearly empty paper towel roll, stayed silent when someone else needed help, because deep down you assumed the responsibility belonged to anyone but you. Yet even then, something inside tugged at you, that faint feeling of guilt or restlessness, as if some ancient instinct whispered, "You know better." You do know better. The Vikings have no patience for pretending not to see a need. If you notice something and choose to ignore it, you are not merely being rude. You are disrupting the balance that keeps the community alive. It is not shame that stops you. It is the awareness that you are part of the whole, whether you like it or not. Later that night, after the storm calms and the longhouse settles into a weary but satisfied quiet, you lie beneath a warm fur and watch the fire breathe against the walls. People sleep close together, safe because of each other's effort. The cooperative rhythm has woven a net of security around every person here, including you, and the realization softens something deep in your chest. You pretend not to know the rule in your own world because modern life lets you, but the instinct never disappeared. It waits under the surface, nudging you whenever you walk past a shared problem. You close your eyes, listening to the quiet breathing all around you. Communal responsibility is not a choice. It is something you carry in your bones, whether you admit it or not. You notice it during your first real argument in the longhouse, or at least what you think might be an argument. 2 men stand near the fire, voices raised just enough to hint at tension, shoulders tight, jaws clenched. You brace yourself for a dramatic explosion, maybe a thrown mug or a swift tackle to the floor. But before anything escalates, 3 people suddenly wander into the space between them, pretending they absolutely needed to walk through that exact spot at that exact moment. One adjusts the firewood. Another rearranges a bench that did not require rearranging. A third compliments one of the men on his boots with comically enthusiastic sincerity. The tension dissolves as smoothly as butter sliding off a hot pan. Within moments, the 2 men are grinning, awkwardly, talking about something entirely different. You realize then that the Vikings have mastered the art of keeping the peace with an efficiency that borders on magic. You spend the next few days watching this strange law unfold. Every conflict, every spark of irritation, every brewing. Disagreement is intercepted quickly, quietly, and almost casually by the group. A woman scolds her brother for mishandling a fishing net, and before her voice can sharpen too far, someone shouts from across the hall, asking her opinion on a stew she has not tasted yet. A man slams his hand on a table after losing a game, but before frustration gains momentum, his opponent distracts him with a boast about how poorly he will lose next time. It is not denial, it is strategy. The Vikings live so close together, rely on one another so completely, that maintaining peace is not optional. It is survival. One feud can divide a village. One grudge can weaken the group during winter. One mismanaged conflict can ripple through the hall like cracks through ice. So they developed an instinct so strong it feels baked into the walls. Keep the peace at all costs. But they do not simply avoid conflict. They redirect it, reshape it, soothe it until it loses its teeth. They do not shame anger. They soften it. They do not silence frustration. They dilute it with humor, distraction, or shared responsibility until the emotions become manageable. You begin to recognize the subtle cues. When voices sharpen, nearby conversations lower. When someone's posture shifts toward confrontation, bodies reposition around them, creating a buffer. When a disagreement strains the air, someone always drifts in with a task, a joke, a question, anything to release the pressure. It feels familiar, uncomfortably familiar. You think of your own life, how you step in with humor when friends argue, how you speak softly during tense moments, how you instinctively change the subject when a conversation tilts too heavily. You always thought you were being polite. Now you see the deeper blueprint. Beneath it, your ancestors survived by keeping the peace, and that instinct lives on in ways you never fully understood. The strangest moment comes when a real conflict sparks. 2 women disagree sharply about the placement of drying fish, their voices rising, their gestures sharp enough to slice. The longhouse responds instantly. People shuffle, repositioning themselves in a loose circle that gently funnels the women apart without ever touching them. Someone steps between them carrying a pot. Someone else offers a drink. Within moments, the disagreement dissolves into laughter as someone tells a story about the time a fox stole a whole rack of fish because no one agreed on where to hang it. The whole hall laughs. The tension evaporates. A potentially explosive moment becomes a shared memory instead of a wound. And then the realization settles into your chest. You do this, too, in offices, in kitchens, at family gatherings. You smooth edges. You soften harshness. You redirect storms. You recognize rising tension before others hear it. Your instinct to maintain peace is not weakness or avoidance. It is ancient training. Later that night, the fire burns low and the vast hall grows quiet. You watch the people around you move with a sense of community that runs deeper than cooperation. It is something like mutual protection, an agreement that peace is everyone's responsibility, not just the leaders. You lie down by the warm glow of the embers, the weight of a fur settling over you, and you feel the truth hum inside your ribs. Keeping the peace is not something you learned. It is something you were born carrying, shaped by ancestors who knew that harmony was the difference between surviving the winter and not surviving at all. And here, in the Longhouse, you finally understand why you still move through the world the way they once did. You feel it on the last morning, long before you understand it. The light that slips through the cracks of the Longhouse feels different, softer, almost golden, as if the sun itself is lingering over the settlement. With a quiet farewell, people move slowly, not out of exhaustion, but out of a collective awareness that something is shifting. You sense it too, a subtle tightening in your chest, a pull you cannot name. It is the feeling of standing between worlds, knowing one is fading behind you even as another waits ahead. You step outside and the air is sharp and still. The sea is calm. Even the gulls seem to glide more gently than usual. The villagers gather in a loose circle near the fire pit, not for a ritual, not for an announcement, but because this is what they do when something has ended or is about to begin. Their presence is quiet, steady, almost ceremonial without trying to be. They do not cling. They do not fuss. They simply stand close enough that their warmth drifts toward you like a final gift. You watch them and notice something that makes your breath catch. Every instinct they carry, every habit that seemed strange at first but gradually became familiar, lives in you too. The way they greet each other with careful intention, the way they keep the peace before conflict has teeth, the way they tidy shared spaces without needing to be told, the way they watch the fire as if monitoring the heartbeat of the world, the way they protect children with a glance, the way they gather at day's end and soften their voices for sleep. You see your own behaviors reflected back at you across centuries. The chieftain approaches, not grandly, not with some heavy proclamation, but with the simple ease of someone who has spent his whole life carrying responsibility gently. He places a hand on your shoulder, the weight of it grounding, and studies your face as though committing it to memory. Around him, villagers begin offering their quiet nods, their soft smiles, their small gestures of farewell. A woman hands you a carved token shaped like a flame. A child tugs your sleeve and presses a smooth stone into your palm. These things mean something, though you do not know what. You just know they matter. There is no single lesson they give you, no final speech, no dramatic revelation. Instead, they offer something far older, something woven through every moment you have spent among them. They offer their way of moving through the world, the quiet rules carved deep into their bones, the instincts shaped by cold nights, shared fires, and lives lived in tight circles of trust. It dawns on you that these instincts never vanished. You still carry them. Your world still echoes with them. Every time you look out a window to check the weather without knowing why, every time you reach to steady something before it falls, every time you scan a crowded room for danger, automatically, every time your heart softens at communal laughter or clenches at sudden silence, every time you light a candle on a dark night, every time you feel drawn to stories, pulled to gatherings, comforted by familiar routines, each of these is a thread tied to them. You take a breath, and the cold air tastes ancient. You understand now. The Vikings did not disappear. They dissolved into the bloodstream of everyone who came after them. Their habits became your habits. Their instincts became your instincts. Their fears, their joys, their rhythms seeped into your behavior so thoroughly that you mistake them for personality. When you return to your own world, you will still greet people with that subtle nod of acknowledgement. You will still hover near the hearth, whatever form it takes. You will still celebrate the first warm day or the first snowflake. You will still tidy shared spaces. You will still read silences as warnings. You will still match your voice to the softness of the night. You will still feel a pull toward community, even when you pretend you do not need one. You will live their memory without realizing you are keeping it alive. As the villagers drift back into the longhouse, You remain outside a moment longer. The wind picks up, carrying the faint scent of smoke and sea salt. You close your eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world feels layered, your present woven tightly with their past. You realize the final thread between your modern life and their vanished world is not a rule or a ritual, it is you.